Welcome back to another story on Supreme Harry. This time, we're bringing you, What If Harry Was Adopted by Morticia Addams After Sorting Hat Exposed Dursley's Abuse live on Wizarding Wireless. Your likes fuel our creativity. Subscribe and stay tuned. Here's the story. Chapter 1. What the Hat Said. The Sorting Hat had been singing for 3 minutes and 40 seconds when it stopped, tilted its frayed brim toward the enchanted ceiling, and said something it had never said in 912 years of operation. "I need a moment." Professor McGonagall, standing rod-straight beside the three-legged stool at the front of the Great Hall, turned her head precisely 2 degrees in the hat's direction. Her expression did not change. It did not need to. Every first-year standing in the nervous cluster behind her felt the temperature drop. The hat did not elaborate. It sat on its stool in the particular way that only a magical object with genuine opinions can sit, with intention, and the 4 house tables full of older students exchanged the kind of glances that meant this has never happened before and someone is going to be in trouble and I hope it isn't me. It wasn't the hat's pause that would be remembered, though. It was what came next. 3 weeks earlier, as part of a broader initiative to bring the wizarding community closer to its institutions, the Wizarding Wireless Network had, for the first time in Hogwarts history, been granted permission to broadcast the sorting ceremony live. Albus Dumbledore had approved it with a smile and a statement about transparency and unity. The WWN had set up a single enchanted microphone, small, silver, shaped like a moth, on a stand near the staff table. The idea was that listeners at home would hear the hat's song, hear the names called, hear the house announcements, and feel connected to the tradition they'd all passed through themselves. What listeners at home heard instead, at approximately 7:43 in the evening on September the 1st, was this: Harry Potter. A pause. The sound of small, careful footsteps. The scrape of the stool. Then silence, the specific silence of a hat thinking, of a mind pressing gently against another mind and finding, in the space of one breath, something that stopped it cold. And then the hat spoke. Not in the voice it used for house declarations, that was a quick, bright bark of a word. This was different. Measured. Deliberate. The voice of something very old that had decided it was done being quiet. "I am required by the terms of my enchantment," the hat said, and its voice carried through the Great Hall, through the Silver Moth, through every wireless set tuned to the WWN across Britain, to sort the student before me into a house that will best serve their growth, their nature, and their potential. I have performed this function for over 900 years. I have sorted children who were frightened, children who were arrogant, children who were grieving, children who were magnificent, and children who were all of these things at once. McGonagall's quill had stopped moving. In 912 years of operation, I have encountered 114 children who arrived at this school carrying the evidence of neglect. I have encountered 37 who carried the evidence of physical harm. In every previous case, those children arrived here and I sorted them and said nothing, because the enchantment that governs me concerns itself with character and aptitude, not circumstance. The Great Hall was completely, profoundly silent. Even the candles seemed to have stopped flickering. "I have decided," the hat said, with the calm finality of something that cannot be argued with, "that this was a mistake." Dumbledore, at the center of the staff table, had gone very still. "The child currently wearing me has been systematically starved, confined, worked as a domestic servant, emotionally terrorized, and physically struck by the individuals legally responsible for his care. He has been told, repeatedly, that his parents were unemployed drunks who died in a car crash. He has been given a cupboard beneath the stairs as a bedroom for the majority of his life. He has never received a birthday cake. He has never been told he is loved. He arrived at this school tonight weighing 41 pounds less than the average for a child of his age and height." Somewhere at the Hufflepuff table, a 5th-year named Hannah Abbott made a sound like she'd been punched. She wasn't the only one. The individuals responsible for this are Vernon Dursley, age 40, of number 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey, his wife, Petunia Dursley née Evans, age 38, and to a lesser degree their son, Dudley Dursley, age 11, whose behavior has been consistently modeled and encouraged by his parents. The magical guardian responsible for placing the child in this home is Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, who was informed of conditions at the residence by a now-deceased house elf 6 years ago and took no action. The silence that followed this was a different kind of silence entirely. It was the silence of 1,000 people holding their breath. Dumbledore's eyes, behind his half-moon spectacles, closed briefly. "Harry James Potter," the hat said, and now its voice shifted, warmer, quieter. "The way old things sound when they're speaking to something small and valuable, is one of the most naturally gifted children I have had the privilege of sorting. He is loyal without being passive, curious without being reckless, and possessed of a moral instinct so deeply rooted that 10 years of deliberate attempts to stamp it out have not made a single lasting mark. He is, in my assessment, extraordinary." "Gryffindor," the hat barked, and then there was chaos. At the Leaky Cauldron, the wireless set above the bar had an audience of 14 people. It was a Tuesday evening and Tom the barman had the volume turned up because several of the patrons had expressed interest in the broadcast. 2 of the 14 were not regulars. They were not British. They sat at a corner table, a woman in a floor-length black dress that seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it, and a man in a pinstriped suit who had been kissing her hand with great enthusiasm every 7 minutes since they sat down. They had been in London for 3 days, pursuing what Gomez Addams had described as a minor matter involving an ancestral property in Wales and a dragon permit that someone had very rudely rescinded. They were staying at the Leaky Cauldron because Morticia had expressed a preference for establishments that didn't pretend to be cheerful, and the Leaky Cauldron, she'd noted approvingly, made no such pretense. Morticia Addams had been listening to the wireless with the focused attention she gave to everything: poetry, nightshades, the sound of bats in the East Wing at home. She held a glass of something dark that Tom had produced from beneath the bar with nervous hands, and she had not moved in approximately 4 minutes. Gomez had stopped kissing her hand. The hat finished. The room around the wireless erupted, voices overlapping, outrage and shock and the particular British sound of people trying to express deep feeling while also maintaining the appearance of being calm, but Morticia heard none of it. She was looking at the middle distance with the expression she wore when she was thinking something through to its conclusion and did not yet wish to share the result. Then she set down her glass with a quiet, deliberate click. "Gomez," she said. "I heard it, cara mia." His voice was rough in a way it rarely was. Gomez Addams had been a lawyer before he decided that the practice of law was too constrained by rules he found limiting, and he had a lawyer's ear for detail and a gambler's ear for significance. He'd heard every word. A cupboard. 10 years in a cupboard. "We need to know who handles child protective matters in the wizarding legal system," Morticia said. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were doing the thing they did when she had decided something and was simply waiting for the world to arrange itself accordingly. "Tonight. I have Gideon Blishwick's card somewhere. He does family law, mentioned it when we were sorting out the dragon permit. Find it." Gomez was already on his feet, one hand reaching into his jacket. "You know," he said, with the particular brightness that came over him when things were about to become dramatic and possibly dangerous, "I didn't expect to like London this much." Morticia picked up her glass again. Around them, the bar was in full-throated uproar. Someone was trying to flucall someone else. Tom the barman had sat down on a stool and was staring at nothing with his mouth slightly open. 2 witches near the window were crying, not quietly. "We'll need documentation," Morticia said. "References. Financial records. Probably a home assessment." "We have a home," Gomez said, with deep satisfaction. "It's a very impressive home. The assessor may not find it straightforward." "Nonsense. It has character. It has a moat. Moats are character." The bar door banged open and a man in lime green robes, St. Mungo's, Morticia would later learn, stumbled in demanding to know if anyone had the number for the ministry's misuse of Muggle Relations office. Someone else was shouting that Dumbledore ought to be sacked. A young witch with a press badge on her robes had appeared from nowhere and was attempting to interview Tom, who appeared to have no opinions he was willing to share. Morticia watched all of it with the calm attention of someone watching weather develop. "There's a child," she said, "who has never been told he is loved, and who will tonight be placed in a dormitory with strangers and told to sleep." Gomez stopped rifling through his pockets. He looked at her. "I want him to have a home," Morticia said simply. "A real one." Gomez Addams crossed the 4 feet between his chair and hers in approximately half a second, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her with a thoroughness that made the distressed patrons of the leaky cauldron briefly forget their distress. "I love you," he announced, to her and to the room and to the general concept of the universe, "more than I love anything." "I know," she said. Find Blishwick's card. At Hogwarts, Harry Potter was sitting at the Gryffindor table and not eating. This was not unusual for him. The habit of not eating was older than any other habit he had, worn into him the way water wears stone, but tonight it was different because the entire Great Hall was looking at him, and he could feel it, the weight of all those eyes, and he didn't know what to do with his face. Percy Weasley had said something kind and formal. A girl with very bushy hair who'd been sorted before him, Hermione Granger, she'd introduced herself with the energy of someone who had been waiting for the right moment, had put a piece of bread on his plate and said, "Eat that," in a tone that brooked no argument. Harry had eaten it. He was still not sure how that had happened. Ron Weasley, sitting across from him, kept opening his mouth and closing it again, which Harry found quietly reassuring. It meant Ron didn't have the right words either, and that meant Harry wasn't the only one who didn't know what you were supposed to say when a magic hat had just told the whole country about your cupboard. It's not your fault," Ron said finally, with the desperate sincerity of someone jumping off a cliff and hoping there's water at the bottom. "None of it." Yeah, Harry said, because Ron clearly needed to hear it. Fred Weasley leaned across from further down the table. "For what it's worth," he said, "and I realize this might not be the moment, but we're going to make Dudley Dursley's life briefly unpleasant if he ever comes near a wizard. Just, filed for future reference." "Same," George said, without looking up from his chicken. Harry looked at the food on the table. There was so much of it. He'd known, intellectually, that Hogwarts had good food. He'd eaten at the feast last year. No, that wasn't right, he hadn't been at a feast last year, there was no last year, this was his first time. He pressed his fingers against the edge of the table to remind himself of where he was. "Can I have some of the potatoes?" he asked, and hated how his voice came out. Small. Asking permission small. The kind of small that had a decade of practice behind it. Hermione put potatoes on his plate. Percy put chicken on his plate. Ron added more bread with the focused intensity of someone who has found a task they can do. Harry looked at his plate and thought, with a clarity that surprised him, that he was very tired of being looked at. But the food was real. That was real. He ate. Dumbledore's office, at 9:15 that evening, contained 4 people and a singular atmosphere of barely controlled catastrophe. Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, was doing what he did best, which was talking loudly about perception and management and what this would look like in the Prophet. He was a small man who used volume as a substitute for substance, and he'd been talking for 11 minutes without saying anything that Dumbledore had found necessary to respond to. Professors McGonagall and Snape stood on opposite sides of the room in the way that suggested they had been placed there deliberately, as counterweights. McGonagall's jaw was set in a line that Dumbledore recognized. It was the line that meant she was holding something in and the holding was costing her. Snape was looking at the wall. "The point," Fudge was saying, "is not what happened. I mean, obviously that's dreadful, the boy, the whole business, but the point is what happens now, because we have 17 owl letters already from the Wizengamot, Cornelius," Dumbledore said. Fudge stopped. "The boy's name is Harry," Dumbledore said. He took off his spectacles and set them on the desk with great care. "He is 11 years old. He is sleeping, I hope, in the dormitory upstairs. That is what matters tonight." "Yes, but tomorrow," McGonagall said, from her side of the room, with the controlled precision of a blade being drawn, we will address the fact that this institution, this ministry, this entire community, left a child in those conditions for 10 years and called it protection. She paused. I called it protection. I was at that house. I watched it. And I left. Fudge made a sound like a man who wants to change the subject. The Dursleys will be arrested by Muggle authorities by morning, Snape said, still looking at the wall. His voice was flat. The hat's broadcast reached Muggle wireless frequencies, an unforeseen consequence of the microphone enchantment. Social services will have been notified. The Dursleys won't be walking away from this. You arranged that, Dumbledore said. It wasn't quite a question. Snape said nothing. The guardianship question, Fudge said, latching onto the practical with the desperation of a drowning man. The boy has no other family on record, he has a godfather, McGonagall said. Who is in Azkaban, Snape said. Allegedly. A silence settled over the room that had a different quality to it, the quality of things that hadn't been examined yet and were now being examined whether anyone wanted them to be or not. The Wizengamot will convene an emergency session, Fudge said. Temporary guardianship will need to be established, someone credible, someone with standing in the community. I will be submitting documentation tonight. Everyone in the room turned. The office door was open. Neither Dumbledore nor Fudge nor McGonagall nor Snape had heard it open. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a floor-length black dress, holding a leather folio. Behind her, one hand on her shoulder and wearing an expression of barely contained delight, stood a man in a pinstriped suit. Fudge sputtered. This is, how did you get up here? The wards, your wards are lovely, the woman said pleasantly. They let us through. She stepped into the room as though she'd been invited, which she had not. My name is Morticia Addams. This is my husband Gomez. We are here to formally petition for guardianship of Harry Potter. McGonagall stared. Snape stared. Fudge made a sound that didn't resolve into words. Dumbledore, after a moment, said, Mrs. Addams. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. We haven't, she agreed. She set the leather folio on his desk with the ease of someone who had decided the desk belonged to the conversation and therefore to her. Our family solicitor, Gideon Blishwick, you may know his firm, has prepared the initial documentation. Financial assessment, property records, character references from the Salem Institute, the New Orleans Apothecary Council, and His Honor Ignatius Blackwood of the Eastern American Wizarding Tribunal. She opened the folio. We also have a letter from Thing. I'm sorry, Fudge said. From what? Thing. He's family. He was quite insistent on including a reference. She paused. He has excellent penmanship. Gomez stepped forward and extended his hand to Dumbledore with the enthusiasm of a man who has been looking forward to this meeting. Tremendous school, he said. Magnificent castle. We came through the dungeon and I have to say, Severus, Snape, is it? You have wonderful taste in decor. Very atmospheric. Snape looked at him the way he looked at most things, with layered contempt and something underneath it that might have been cautious assessment. You can't simply walk in here and claim a child, Fudge said, finding his footing. There are processes. There are committees, I'm aware, Morticia said. We will follow every process. We will attend every committee. She closed the folio and looked at Dumbledore directly, which was something most people did not do, not because they weren't allowed, but because Dumbledore's eyes tended to do something that made sustained eye contact feel like being gently managed. Morticia's eyes, dark and extraordinarily still, did something quite different back. I am not asking for your permission tonight, Headmaster. I am informing you of my intention. There is a difference. Dumbledore looked at her for a long moment. Outside, a phoenix made a soft sound. Indeed there is, he said, and something in his voice was different than it had been, a slight recalibration, like a man who has just recognized the terrain has changed. May I ask what prompts this? You don't know the boy. No, Morticia said. I heard him. As did everyone in Britain tonight. She was quiet for a beat. I heard a child who has been taught that he takes up too much space. I find that I have strong feelings about that. Gomez, unbidden, sat down in one of the chairs before Dumbledore's desk and crossed his legs with the ease of a man who treats every room as his living room. We're not going anywhere, he said, cheerfully but with absolute clarity. So we might as well all get comfortable. Fudge looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked at the folio. McGonagall looked at Morticia Addams with the expression of someone revising a first impression at significant speed. They did not take Harry that night. Morticia had not expected to. The paperwork alone would take days, Wisengamot session, ministry review, the inevitable prophet coverage, and she would not rush it. Rushing was for people who weren't certain of the outcome. She was certain. What she did do, at Dumbledore's somewhat stunned acquiescence, was ask to see Harry. McGonagall escorted her up through the castle. Gomez remained behind with Dumbledore and Fudge, which Morticia judged would be useful in keeping both men occupied and slightly off balance, through corridors that smelled of stone and old magic and, very faintly, of something like cedar. He's asleep, McGonagall said, outside the portrait of the fat lady. I'd rather not wake him. I don't want to wake him, Morticia said. McGonagall looked at her. I want to leave him something, Morticia said. She reached into the folio and produced a small card, black, edged in silver, a single line written in her particular handwriting, which was ornate and absolutely legible and suggested someone who had opinions about the importance of penmanship. So that when he wakes up, he knows that someone knows where he is. McGonagall took the card and read it. Her expression did the thing it had been doing all evening, which was cycling between composure and something unguarded and human underneath. She looked up. You heard the broadcast. Yes. And you simply, decided. Yes. McGonagall considered this. Mrs. Addams, she said, and then stopped, and started again. I owe that boy an apology that I don't know how to give. Morticia looked at her steadily. You can begin, she said, by making sure the card reaches him. McGonagall straightened. She gave the password to the fat lady, who was eyeing Morticia with the wide-eyed alarm of a painted woman who has seen everything in 4 centuries and is now seeing something new, and went through. She was back in 90 seconds. Done, she said. Morticia nodded once. She looked up at the corridor ceiling, at the sconces burning low, at the shadows that gathered in the high corners the way they gathered at home, and for a moment she was simply a woman in a hallway, listening to a castle breathe. He's safe here? She asked. Yes, McGonagall said. And then, with the bare honesty of someone who has stopped managing, more than he was. That, Morticia said, is the lowest possible bar. She turned and walked back down the corridor, and McGonagall, who had faced dark wizards and transformed students and 37 years of institutional bureaucracy without flinching, felt very strongly that the wizarding world had just encountered something it was thoroughly unprepared for. Harry found the card in the morning. He'd woken early out of habit. The habit was called Uncle Vernon, and it said that lying in bed after 6 was laziness and laziness had consequences, and in the grey light before the other boys stirred, he'd found it on the small table beside his bed. Black card. Silver edging. 4 lines. You were seen tonight. Not the performance the world has decided you are, you, the actual person. You don't know us yet. That's fine. We're coming. M and G. Addams. Harry read it 3 times. He turned it over. He turned it back. He had no context for it. No framework in which a stranger heard something terrible about you and decided to come toward you rather than away. His entire architecture of the world was built on the understanding that the things that were wrong with him made people want less of him, not more. He set the card down. He picked it up again. He put it in the pocket of his school robes, the new ones, bought in Diagon Alley 3 weeks ago, still slightly stiff, and felt it there, small and flat and real. At breakfast, an owl arrived for him. That alone was strange. He didn't know anyone who would owl him, but stranger still was the owl. It was enormous and black and appeared to find the entire experience of the great hall somewhat beneath it. It dropped a package on his plate with the disdain of an animal completing a task it had not chosen, and then it left without waiting for a treat or acknowledgement, which impressed Harry enormously. The package contained one very dark chocolate bar, from a Belgian maker he'd never heard of, wrapped in black foil, one book, slim, dark green cover, titled Memorable Duels of the 14th Century, by someone named Araminta Addams, with a handwritten note tucked in the front. You'll probably need this before the year's out. And a letter. He read the letter. It was from Gomez Addams, and it was 3 pages long and managed to be simultaneously a formal legal notification of intended guardianship proceedings, a personal introduction, an enthusiastic summary of Gomez's own experience arriving at a magical school for the first time, the Salem Institute, age 11, where I set fire to the East Tower on my second day, accidentally, mostly, and an offer to call if Harry had questions, or if you simply want to talk, which, I want you to know, is a perfectly valid reason to call. My wife is filing paperwork with the Wisengamot as we speak, and she wanted me to assure you that the process will be handled with both thoroughness and speed, though thoroughness is winning the race this morning. At the bottom, in different handwriting, the same handwriting as the card, was one line. You don't have to decide anything. Just eat breakfast. Harry stared at the postscript for a long time. Then he ate breakfast. He ate a lot of it, actually, more than he'd eaten at a single sitting in recent memory, with Ron watching in satisfied silence across the table and Hermione reading the letters over his shoulder without asking and deciding not to comment, which was, Harry was beginning to realize, one of her more valuable qualities. The wizarding world did not handle the morning quietly. The Prophet ran a front page with the headline Scandal at the sorting in letters so large they took up a third of the page, with a smaller subheading that read Dumbledore's role in Potter guardianship arrangement under investigation. Fudge had given a statement that managed to condemn the Dursleys, defend the Ministry's lack of oversight, and call for calm all at once, which was an impressive feat of saying nothing. The Wisengamot was convening an emergency session. 2 members had already called for Dumbledore's removal from the Hogwarts board. 3 had called for his immediate reinstatement as Supreme Mugwump. The Dursleys had been taken by Muggle police at approximately 6 in the morning. The Hat's broadcast had indeed reached Muggle frequencies, which Snape's charm to the Silver Moth had ensured, though he had submitted no documentation to that effect and no one had asked him directly. In the leaky cauldron, Morticia sat at the corner table with 6 inches of Blishwick's notes, a quill, and a cup of black tea that she was not drinking. She was annotating. She had been annotating since 5 in the morning. She annotated the way she did most things, with absolute focus and the faint impression that the papers were slightly afraid of her. Gomez returned from the bar with a copy of the Prophet and the expression of a man who has read something that has made him simultaneously delighted and prepared to cause violence. Malfoy, he said, setting the paper down and tapping a small article at the bottom of the page. Morticia read it without touching the paper. Lucius Malfoy, governor of the Hogwarts board and prominent ministry advisor, had given a statement to the Prophet expressing grave concern regarding the stability of any guardianship arrangement pursued by parties unknown to the wizarding community. He had further suggested that any guardianship decision should be made by a committee of appropriate wizarding families, to ensure the boys' cultural and educational continuity. He had specifically referenced foreign parties 3 times without naming names. He's already found out about us, Morticia said. Blishwick's filing hit the public register at midnight, Gomez said. Someone with ministry access flagged it. Malfoy has ministry access. Morticia finished annotating the page she was on and turned to the next. He'll come at the board first. Then the Wisengamot. He'll argue cultural grounds and then financial fitness, and then, if both of those fail, he'll find something in the regulations about non-British guardians and try to make it stick. Should I be worried? No, she said. Should I call Wednesday? Gomez considered. It might be premature. She'll want to know about Harry before he meets her. She'll want time to form an opinion. She'll form an opinion in about 8 seconds of meeting him. She will, Morticia agreed. But she'll be more courteous about it if she's had time to prepare. Gomez looked at her over the paper with the expression he reserved for moments when she was being precisely herself. You've already decided he's ours. Haven't you? He reached across the table and took her hand, and kissed her knuckles once, slowly. Cara mia, he said. The moment I heard that hat speak his name, I thought, here is a child who needs to know that the things about him that are extraordinary are not something to manage. He paused. I know a little about that. Morticia looked at him. Then she looked back at the papers. We'll need to be in London for at least a month, she said. The school term will mean visits on weekends and holidays initially, but there will be summer. We need a residence. I was thinking Wales, Gomez said. The ancestral property. It needs work, but the bones are excellent. It's mostly bones. Exactly. She almost smiled, which for Morticia was equivalent to anyone else bursting into song. Write to Blishwick, she said. Tell him we want the Wales property expedited alongside the guardianship petition. And, she paused, and her voice, just briefly, shifted into something quieter, find out if there's a process to get him out of that castle for a weekend. Soon. I want to meet him before the world decides who he should be to us. Gomez was already writing. Around them, the leaky cauldron hummed with the low, electric frequency of a community in crisis, voices too loud, gestures too sharp, the particular human noise of people who don't know how to hold what they're feeling. Morticia picked up her tea. It had gone cold. She drank it anyway, and returned to her papers, and somewhere in the castle above London, in a dormitory bed that was better than anything he'd slept in before, Harry Potter kept a black and silver card in the pocket of his school robes and tried to remember what it had felt like to read the words were coming and not know whether to be frightened. He decided, by evening, that he wasn't. Which was new. Which was the first new thing in a long time. Chapter 2, The House That Chose Them. The Wisengamot session lasted 4 hours and 20 minutes, which Gomez described afterward as the most entertaining legal theater I've witnessed since the New Orleans alligator dispute of 1974, and which Morticia described as adequate. Blishwick had done his work well. The financial documentation alone was enough to make 3 of the more skeptical members visibly recalibrate. The Addams family fortune was old, deep, and diversified across 3 continents in ways that suggested it had been growing undisturbed for long enough to develop its own ecosystem. The property records showed 11 residences across 4 countries. The character references from American wizarding institutions were effusive to the point of embarrassment, though Morticia had noted in the margin of the Salem Institute's letter that effusive was not the same as accurate, and had edited 2 paragraphs before submitting it. The opposition came from exactly the direction they'd expected. Lucius Malfoy was not a member of the Wisengamot himself, his role was advisory, but he had allies in every row, and he had clearly spent the previous evening calling in favors. His argument was delivered through a senior undersecretary named Orpington, a thin woman with an impressive command of regulations and absolutely no independent thought, who spent 40 minutes arguing that the guardianship petition was procedurally irregular because the Addams family were not registered residents of the British wizarding community. Blishwick countered that the regulation in question had been written in 1743 to prevent Muggle orphanages from claiming magical children, not to restrict international adoption, and that applying it in this context was an adventurous interpretation of a law whose authors had been dead for 200 years. Morticia said nothing during the session. She sat in the petitioner's gallery and watched, and when someone said something substantively wrong she wrote a note and passed it to Blishwick, who incorporated it without hesitation. Gomez, beside her, was quiet for approximately the first half hour, after which he began writing what appeared to be a very long letter, the contents of which he did not explain. At the end of 4 hours, the Wisengamot voted. Temporary guardianship, provisional, with a formal review in 6 weeks, was granted to Morticia and Gomez Addams, by a margin of 19 to 11. The 11 who voted against it included every member Morticia had identified as Malfoy-aligned, which confirmed what she already knew: this wasn't over. The 6-week review would be the real fight. She had 6 weeks. She stood, gathered her folio, and walked out of the Wisengamot chamber with the unhurried stride of a woman who has never once looked back at a door closing behind her. They went to get Harry on the 3rd Saturday of September. McGonagall met them at the castle gates with the expression of someone who has had a complicated 2 weeks and is managing it with professionalism and very little sleep. She'd sent Harry ahead to wait at the gates rather than have the Addamses enter the castle, which Morticia recognized as a small assertion of institutional control and let pass without comment. Harry was standing just inside the gate with his school bag over one shoulder and the specific posture of someone who has been waiting long enough to start wondering if they've been forgotten. He was small, the hat's assessment of his weight had not been abstract, and Morticia had been tracking it with a quiet, sustained anger since the night of the broadcast. He had his mother's eyes, apparently, though Morticia had no point of reference for that. What she saw was a boy who had learned to occupy as little space as possible and was now standing in front of 2 strangers who told him, via letter, that they intended to change his life, and was doing a remarkable job of looking like he was fine with that. He wasn't fine. His hands were absolutely still at his sides, which was the giveaway: people who are comfortable let their hands do what they want. Harry's hands were held in the way of someone who'd been told too many times that his fidgeting was a problem. Morticia walked forward. She did not crouch to his level, because she found that condescending, and she did not smile in the bright, reassuring way of adults who want children to feel managed. She stopped at a distance that was respectful rather than close, and she looked at him. "Harry," she said. "Hello," he said. Then, "Mrs. Addams." Then, as if uncertain, "Is that right?" "It's right," she said. "You can call me Morticia, if you prefer." He considered this seriously. "Okay," he said. "Morticia." He tested the word as if it were new in his mouth, which it was. "It's a good name." "Thank you. I've always thought so." Gomez appeared at her shoulder with the momentum of a man for whom restraint has always been temporary. "Harry," he said, and extended his hand with the full conviction of someone who has decided they already like you. "Gomez Addams. Tremendous to meet you. Magnificent scar, by the way, very distinguished. My son Pugsley has a scar on his left arm from an incident with a trebuchet, but yours has real narrative quality." Harry looked at Gomez, then at his extended hand, and shook it. Something shifted in his face, not quite relaxation, but the earliest precursor of it, the moment when you realize that whatever you were braced for is not the thing that's happening. "A trebuchet," Harry said. "He built it himself," Gomez said, with the specific pride of a father whose measure of his child's worth is entirely unrelated to conventional standards. "He was 9. Does it work?" "Magnificently," Gomez said. "We had to reinforce the east wall. The whole thing was educational." McGonagall made a sound that might have been a cough. Morticia looked at Harry. "We have a house in Wales," she said. "We'd like you to see it. We'll have you back here Sunday evening, we've cleared it with Professor McGonagall." Harry nodded, and shouldered his bag more firmly, and said, "All right." It was not enthusiasm. It was something more considered than that, a decision, made with the careful deliberation of a boy who had learned to evaluate everything before he committed to it. Morticia respected it more than she would have respected enthusiasm. They walked out through the castle gates, the 3 of them, and the last thing Morticia heard before the gate closed behind them was McGonagall's voice, very quiet, talking to no one in particular. "About time," she said. The house in Wales was called Blackthorn Hall. Gomez had purchased it 6 months earlier sight unseen, on the basis of a property listing that described it as historic, character-rich, and requiring significant renovation. He had shown Morticia the listing over breakfast one morning and she had said, "Buy it," before he'd finished reading the description, because what the listing had carefully not said, but what was evident in the photograph, to anyone who knew how to look, was that the house was built over a natural chalk cavity, had a tower that leaned 11 degrees to the east, and had been empty for 60 years following an incident that the listing described only as a historical event of note. It was perfect. In practice, it was a 4-story manor house of grey stone that sat at the edge of a cliff above the Welsh coast, wrapped in the particular darkness of a place that the sun visited professionally but didn't linger. The gardens, if they could be called that, were remarkable in the way that things are remarkable when they've been left entirely to their own devices for decades. The roses had grown over the east wing, the topiary had abandoned whatever shapes they'd originally been cut into and were now pursuing their own aesthetic, and something was living in the ornamental pond that Gomez had described as, probably a Gryffindor, and if so, a welcome addition. It was surrounded on 3 sides by wood and on one side by a cliff, and it smelled of sea salt and old stone and something underneath those things, something that wasn't unpleasant but wasn't ordinary either, the smell of a place that has its own history and intends to keep it. Harry stood in front of it and stared. "It looks like it might collapse," he said, in a tone that was not quite sure if this was a problem. "The east tower leans," Gomez agreed, but the structural assessment confirmed that it leans deliberately. As in, it leaned and then stopped, as if it decided that was the right angle. He paused. "I found that reassuring. We've been staying here this week," Morticia said. "It's habitable." "Mostly." "What part isn't mostly?" "The 3rd-floor corridor." Harry turned to look at her. Something flickered in his face, not alarm, precisely. More like recognition. "There's always something on the 3rd-floor corridor," he said, quietly, and Morticia looked at him with real attention because that had been a joke, delivered so drilly and with such good timing that she wondered for a moment if he even knew he'd made it. "Exactly," she said. "Come inside." The inside of Blackthorn Hall was in the process of becoming something. The ground floor had been cleaned and furnished, Morticia's particular aesthetic operating here in full, which meant that comfort and darkness were not in competition but in collaboration, deep-colored walls and heavy curtains and furniture that looked as though it had been chosen by someone who found the idea of matching sets aesthetically timid. Gomez gave Harry a tour with the enthusiasm of a man showing off a property he's genuinely delighted to own. He showed him the kitchen, enormous, smelling of something complicated and good, the sitting room, currently occupied by a chess set mid-game and a stack of books that appeared to have organized themselves, the library, which ran the full length of the east wing and contained approximately 4,000 books, a fact that made Harry's eyes do something that Morticia filed away, and the garden, where they paused while something in the ornamental pond surfaced briefly and regarded them with the flat hostility of something aquatic and ancient, before sliding back under the dark water. "Is that a Gryffindor?" Harry asked. "We're calling him Gerald," Gomez said. "Does Gerald know that?" "Gerald seems unbothered." Harry looked at the pond for another moment. Then, quietly, "I had a pet owl. Hedwig. She's back at Hogwarts." "I didn't, I wasn't sure if I should bring her." "Bring her next time," Morticia said, from behind them. "This is your home as much as ours, when you're here." "Her too." Harry turned around to look at her. That careful, evaluating look again, checking the statement for the small print, for the exceptions and caveats and the as long as yous that he'd learned to expect attached to everything anyone offered him. There weren't any. He looked back at the pond. "Okay," he said. They ate dinner at a table that was too large for 3 people and was therefore perfect. Morticia had cooked, which turned out to mean something unexpected. The food was not conventional, but it was excellent and abundant, and Harry ate with the focused determination of someone who has not yet relearned how to be relaxed about meals. Gomez talked, which seemed to be his natural condition, and what he talked about covered the history of the house, the nature of the Addams family's relationship with magic, older than most American families, but different, more intuitive than academic. Wednesday would say feral, but that's her being generous, the dragons in the Welsh ministry permit system, and his brief career as a defense attorney before he decided that the law was a fascinating structure that I found more interesting to observe than to operate within. Harry, across the table, was eating roasted something or other and listening with the particular attention of a child who has been talked at a great deal and talked to very little and knows the difference and is recalibrating. "What kind of cases did you do?" he asked. "Defense, mostly," Gomez said. "I had an excellent record. My win rate was not the impressive part. The impressive part was that I only took cases I genuinely found interesting, which meant I occasionally defended people who were probably guilty of the charge but were innocent of the interesting part." "What's the interesting part?" "The motive," Gomez said. "The why. The mechanism of human decision-making that leads someone to a specific action. Guilt and innocence are categories. Why someone did a thing, that's a story." Harry was quiet for a moment. "The Sorting Hat," he said. "It said stuff about me. The whole wizarding world heard it." "Yes," Gomez said. "Does it change?" Harry stopped. "Start it again. You heard it before you knew me. Does it, is it why you're doing this? Because you felt bad about it?" Morticia set down her fork. "Harry," she said. He looked at her. "We are doing this," she said, "because we heard a description of a child and recognized, with complete clarity, that the child in that description needed something the wizarding world was not going to give him." She paused. "We're not doing it out of pity. Pity is a feeling people have when they want to help but not too much. We're doing it because we want to." Harry watched her carefully. "It's all right if you don't believe that yet," she said. "You haven't had reason to believe it before. You'll have reason eventually." Something in his face shifted again, the same thing she'd seen at the gate, that precursor to ease. He picked up his fork. "You have a daughter," he said. "Wednesday. She sent a book." "She did," Morticia said. "And a son. Pugsley. He's younger. Do they know about me?" "Wednesday knows everything about everything," Gomez said cheerfully. "Pugsley knows that we're bringing someone home and that he must not, under any circumstances, show this person the basement before the second visit." Harry paused. "Why the second visit?" "First impressions," Gomez said seriously. "You want to give people a chance to form an opinion of you before they see the basement." "What's in the basement?" "Pugsley's experiments," Gomez said. "Are they dangerous?" "Moderately. He has good control. It's more the aesthetic that's confronting." Harry looked at Gomez for a long moment with the expression of a boy who has spent 11 years being told that strange things were wrong things and is now in a house where strange things are being described with the casual affection of someone discussing a beloved hobby, and is not entirely sure what to do with the cognitive dissonance. "I want to see the basement," he said. Gomez beamed like a man who has just received the best possible news. "Second visit," he said firmly. "Morticia's rules. She's always right about these things." Morticia, who had returned to her dinner, said nothing, but the line of her shoulders suggested that she was pleased. After dinner, Morticia took Harry to the library. Not for any declared purpose, she simply walked there and he followed, and they stood for a moment in the long room with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and the smell of old paper and the specific quality of silence that only exists in rooms full of books. "You can take any of these," she said. He looked at the spines. He moved closer and tilted his head to read titles. She watched him do it, the way his hand came up halfway as if to touch a spine and then pulled back, checking itself. "You can touch them," she said. "They're books. Touching them is what they're for." He put his hand on the spine of a dark green volume. His fingers stayed there. "The Dursleys didn't have many books," he said. "Dudley had some but he mostly used them to throw." Morticia said nothing. "I used to read at school," he said. "In the library. I'd stay there after class until Dudley and his friends," he stopped. "Recalibrated. I read a lot there." "What did you read?" He shrugged with one shoulder. "Whatever was in. History stuff. Sometimes science. One time I found a whole section of mythology and read every book in it." A pause. I didn't know any of it was real. Most of it isn't, Morticia said. But the parts that are interesting. He pulled the green book from the shelf and looked at the title. Something in Latin she had to lean slightly to read, De Rebus Mirabilibus, an old natural history of unusual phenomena. He turned it over. Put it back. Pulled out another, this one she recognized, a collection of correspondence between two early modern wizards that read more like a thriller than a historical document. Can I read tonight? He asked. Before bed? It's your weekend, she said. Do whatever you want. He held the books against his chest and looked at her with the expression of a boy hearing something in a foreign language and beginning to identify individual words. I've never, he started. At the Dursleys, there was a list of things I was allowed to do. It was a short list. He paused. I don't really know what I want to do. I haven't had a lot of practice. Morticia considered this. It was one of the most honest things anyone had said to her in years. Then we'll find out, she said. That's what weekends are for. He nodded slowly. She turned to leave and he said, Morticia. She stopped. Thank you for the card, he said. The one you left at Hogwarts. The first night. You kept it? It's in my robe's pocket, he said. I read it when when it's been a hard day. She looked at him for a moment. The library was very quiet around them, and the light was low, and he looked so much younger than he was trying to look, all that careful composure that wasn't composure yet, just the practiced stillness of someone who had learned to give very little away. We'll write more, she said. Often. Okay, he said, and there was something in the word that she recognized, not gratitude exactly, but the first tentative signal of someone deciding to trust something new. She left him in the library. He read until past midnight, which she knew because she saw the light under the library door when she came downstairs at 11 for her tea and again at midnight to close a window. She did not knock. She let him have it. Wednesday arrived on Sunday morning. She arrived unannounced, via flu, with a suitcase and the expression of a girl who has decided that prior notice is a courtesy extended only to people she respects, and she respects her mother enough to have debated it. I told Blishwick I needed to come, she said to Morticia, dropping the suitcase in the entrance hall with a thud that suggested it was much heavier than it looked. For the 6-week review. I should be able to provide a sibling assessment. Blishwick doesn't need a sibling assessment, Morticia said. No, Wednesday agreed. But I do. She looked around the entrance hall with the focused attention of a general surveying terrain. Where is he? In the garden. He found the cliff path this morning. Wednesday's eyes shifted to the window. Alone on a cliff path, she said, with faint approval. Good instincts. He's been out there for an hour, Gomez said, from the sitting room doorway, with the expression of a man who finds his daughter's arrival both delightful and slightly alarming, which was the appropriate response. He had a book. Which book? I couldn't tell from the window. Wednesday picked up her suitcase and walked toward the garden door with the purposeful stride of someone who has decided to form an opinion and doesn't believe in taking longer than necessary. Wednesday, Morticia said. She stopped. Be kind, Morticia said. In your way. Wednesday gave her mother a look that said several things simultaneously, including I am always kind in my way and you knew that when you said it and I find the qualifier offensive. Then she went out into the garden. Harry was sitting on a flat rock at the edge of the cliff path, about 30 feet from the house, with his legs dangling over the edge and a book open in his lap. He was reading and also watching the sea, which is a specific combination that suggests a person who finds the world interesting but isn't finished thinking about it. Wednesday stopped 3 feet behind him. He said, without looking up, you came from the house, so you're probably family. You didn't call out, which means you're either polite or you're testing something. The footsteps were even, so you're not worried about the cliff. He turned a page. You're Wednesday, he said. Wednesday studied the back of his head. How'd you know? The book you sent had a note. The handwriting matched the footsteps. He glanced back at her. That's not a thing. I mean, I just guessed. The deduction was real until the last sentence, she said. Don't undercut yourself. He looked at her properly now. She was taller than he'd expected and wore all black and looked at him the way a chess player looks at an opening move, assessing, not hostile, but absolutely without the social performance most people put on when they're deciding if they like you. He moved sideways on the rock to make room. She sat down. They both looked at the sea for a moment. You sent a dueling history, he said. You'll need it. You think I'm going to be in a lot of duels? I think you're the most famous person in your world and your world contains people who have strong opinions about what that means, she said. So yes. Harry considered this. I didn't ask to be famous. Nobody interesting ever does, Wednesday said. The people who ask for it aren't the ones worth being afraid of. I'm not afraid of anyone. She looked at him sideways. Not skeptically, more like recalibrating. Good, she said. You shouldn't be. She paused. I was afraid you'd be someone I had to be careful around. The celebrity orphan type. Fragile in specific ways that make social interactions exhausting. Am I not? The jury's still out, she said. But you moved over on the rock without being asked, which suggests spatial awareness and low territorial instinct, which are both good signs. Harry looked at her with the expression of someone who has just realized they're being evaluated and has decided to find it interesting rather than uncomfortable. What happens if the jury decides I'm terrible? I tell Mother and she decides what to do with that information, Wednesday said. She usually ignores my assessments when she's already decided something. Has she already decided something? Wednesday looked at the sea. She decided the night of the broadcast, she said. I heard her on the phone with Father at midnight. When she calls Father at midnight there are only two reasons, something's wrong, or something's very right and she wants him to know immediately. She paused. He was still in London. She was at home. She called to tell him they needed to make some arrangements. Harry was quiet. She doesn't do things impulsively, Wednesday said. People think she does because she moves quickly. But she'd already thought it through. She always has. What about you? Harry asked. What did you think? Wednesday considered this with the seriousness she gave everything. I thought, she said, that someone who'd survived what you'd survived for 10 years without breaking, without losing whatever it is in him that made the hat call him extraordinary, was someone I wanted to know. Harry turned back to his book. I want to know if you're worth knowing, she said. That's not the same as deciding you are. That's fair, he said. I know it is. They sat on the cliff for another 40 minutes, not talking particularly, in the comfortable silence of two people who are both more interested in the thing they're thinking than in filling the air. Harry read. Wednesday did not read but appeared to be doing something equally focused, staring at the middle distance with the intensity of someone running internal calculations. When they went in for lunch, Gomez, who had been watching from the library window with barely contained emotion, grabbed Morticia's arm and said, They sat on the cliff together, Morticia, they sat on the cliff, in a voice that suggested he found this more moving than he had words for. I know, she said. Do you think? Yes, she said. I think. Over lunch, Harry asked Wednesday about the memorable duels book. The 4th chapter, Wednesday said. The duel between Florentine Voss and the Beauxbatons instructor. Voss won with 4 spells and a conversational misdirection. He made the instructor think the fight was about dominance, so the instructor kept pressing forward, and Voss just let him. And then the instructor had committed too far and had no defense left and Voss ended it in 1. She reached across the table for the salt. Most fights are won before the first spell. Harry looked at her. You duel. I train, she said. There's a difference. Dueling is performance. Training is preparation for the thing after performance fails. What thing? Whatever it is, she said simply. Gomez launched into a story about his own dueling history at Salem Institute that involved a miscast levitation charm, a chandelier, and what he described as a gentleman's agreement with the school about what would and wouldn't be reported to my father, and the afternoon moved forward in the way that good afternoons do, with conversation that has real weight in it, and food, and the low autumn light coming through the windows of Blackthorn Hall turning everything to gold and shadow. At 4:30, Morticia sat with Harry in the library while Gomez and Wednesday argued companionably about something in the sitting room that seemed to involve a map. "How is school?" Morticia asked. She meant the real version of the question, not the social version. Harry thought about it. "Strange," he said. "Not bad strange. Just, I didn't know what to expect, and what's there is different from anything I expected." He paused. "There's a teacher. Potions. Snape. I've heard of him. He doesn't like me," Harry said. "Why?" "I don't know exactly. He knew my father. I think it's about that." "What do you do when he's unkind?" Harry glanced at her. "I don't let it show that it bothers me," he said. "But I don't look away either. He marks my work fairly even when he talks to me like I'm an inconvenience, so I don't think he wants me to fail. I think he wants me to feel small." Morticia studied him. "And does it work?" Harry thought about it honestly. "Less than it used to," he said. "Since the broadcast." "Since," he stopped. "Since the card. It's like, before, I thought I was the problem. The smallness was the truth about me. And now I think maybe the person trying to make you feel small is telling you more about themselves than about you." Morticia said nothing. She let that sit there. "Hermione thinks he's brilliant," Harry said. "At potions. She's probably right. She can be both things," Morticia said. "Brilliant and unkind." "Yeah," Harry said. "I know." They sat with that for a moment. Outside, the light was beginning to fade and the sea was the color of old pewter, and somewhere in the sitting room Gomez had apparently won whatever argument he'd been having, because his voice rang out with the particular triumph of a man who has made an excellent point and is delighted about it. "There's something going on at school," Harry said. "I don't know what it is. There's a corridor on the 3rd floor, Dumbledore told us at the start of term not to go there. Painful death, he said. And I think there's something there. Something being hidden." He paused. "I think it's why Quirrell, he's the defense teacher, why he seems nervous all the time. Not the normal teacher nervous. Something else." Morticia looked at him steadily. "What do you plan to do about it?" "Find out what it is," he said. Not with bravado. As a statement of fact. "Be careful," she said. Not in the way of someone telling him to stop. In the way of someone who wants him to be smart about it. "I'm careful," he said. Yeah. I'll be careful. You have people you trust at school." "Hermione," he said immediately. "And Ron." "Yeah. Tell them," she said. "Don't do it alone. Not because you can't, I think you can do a great deal alone, but because the things that go wrong when you're alone go wrong all the way." He nodded. This made sense to him in the bone-deep way that practical advice makes sense when it comes from someone who means it. "Morticia," he said. "Yes. Is this," he stopped. "Is this what it's like? Having a family? This?" She looked at him. He was looking at the books, not at her, with the expression of someone asking a question they're not entirely sure they want answered. "Yes," she said. "This is part of it." "What are the other parts?" "Chaos," she said. "Arguing about maps. Gerald the Grindylow. Someone always reading a book about something dangerous." She paused. "Being known. That's the other part. Being the thing you actually are, with people who actually want that thing." He was quiet for a long moment. I want to come back next weekend, he said. We'll arrange it, she said. He nodded, and picked up his book, and they read in the library while the light faded outside and Gomez made something for dinner that smelled extraordinary, and Wednesday came in and sat in the chair across from Harry and read her own book without any ceremony about it, and outside, Gerald surfaced briefly in the ornamental pond and regarded the lights of Blackthorn Hall with the flat, ancient consideration of something that does not give its approval easily. The light stayed on for a long time. McGonagall met them at the gates at 7:30. She looked at Harry and then at the Addamses and then back at Harry with the sharp-eyed assessment of a woman who has taught long enough to know what a child looks like when something in them has shifted. Harry had eaten 3 meals. He had stayed up late reading. He had sat on a cliff with a girl who didn't pretend the world was uncomplicated, and had found that more comforting than any amount of reassurance. He was carrying 2 books from the Blackthorn Hall library tucked under his arm, and his hands, McGonagall noticed, were not held in that careful, controlled stillness anymore. "Good weekend?" she asked. "Yeah," Harry said. "Really good." He went through the gate. Morticia watched him go, watched his shoulders, the way he walked, the slight straightening that was almost imperceptible but that she could see because she was looking for it. "The 6-week review," McGonagall said quietly, to Morticia. "Malfoy's people have filed a challenge. I thought you should know before Monday's profit." "Thank you," Morticia said. "We know. He has significant influence on the Wizengamot." "He has," Morticia agreed. "But he's never encountered anyone who finds his influence interesting rather than threatening." McGonagall looked at her for a moment with the same expression she'd worn in the corridor 2 weeks ago, revising, recalibrating. "No," she said. "I don't believe he has." Gomez offered her his hand, which she shook with slightly surprised professionalism. "We'll see you next weekend, Professor," he said. "Do try to keep the castle standing." "I'll do my best," she said, and the line of her mouth did something that, if you were being very generous, you might have called a smile. Morticia and Gomez walked back through the gate and down the path, and behind them the castle rose into the darkening September sky, and somewhere inside it, Harry Potter climbed the stairs to Gryffindor Tower with 2 books under his arm and the black and silver card in his pocket and a feeling in his chest that he didn't quite have a name for yet. He'd find one. He had time. Chapter 3, What Hogwarts Makes of Them. The first time Harry walked into potions and didn't flinch, Snape noticed. It wasn't a dramatic change. Harry didn't swagger in or smirk or do any of the things that students who thought they were being bold typically did. He just walked in, took his seat, set up his equipment with reasonable efficiency, and looked at the board. But there was something different in the set of his shoulders, and Snape, who had spent 17 years reading students the way other people read weather, filed it away without comment. The lesson was on swelling solution. Snape moved through the dungeon in his customary manner, which combined genuine instruction with the practiced deployment of atmospheric pressure, pausing behind students long enough to make them doubt themselves, making observations about technique that were accurate and ungentle. He stopped behind Harry. "Potter," he said. "What is the function of the murtlap in this solution?" The old Harry, the one from the first 2 weeks of term, would have tensed. Would have given a small, careful answer, voice pitched slightly upward at the end as if asking for permission to have been right. Snape had catalogued this. He had not examined his feelings about it. Harry looked at the board, then at his ingredients. "It stabilizes the reaction," he said. "Without it, the swelling is uncontrolled. The murtlap keeps it proportional." A pause. "I think." "You think," Snape said. "I'd need to see what happens without it to be certain," Harry said. "But that's my reasoning." Snape studied the back of his head. The answer was correct. The "I think" was honest rather than defensive. The offer to test the hypothesis was, academically, the right instinct. "The reasoning," Snape said, moving on, "is adequate." At the Slytherin side of the dungeon, Draco Malfoy looked up from his cauldron with the faint, unsatisfied expression of a boy who had been expecting a different outcome and didn't know what to do with the one he'd gotten. Draco had been watching Harry since the broadcast. This was not something he would have admitted to anyone, including himself, if you'd put the question to him directly. But the fact was that the sorting night had rearranged certain calculations, and Draco Malfoy had been raised, above all things, to recalculate. His father had told him the morning after the broadcast. The letter was long, careful, and said several things on the surface that meant something different underneath, which was how his father always wrote. On the surface, concern for the school's reputation, the importance of maintaining relationships with the right families, the advisability of keeping a social distance from students whose circumstances were unstable. Underneath, the Addamses have filed for guardianship and I am attempting to stop it and I don't want you doing anything that complicates that. Draco had read the letter twice and then placed it in his trunk and not thought about it directly since, which was a different thing from not thinking about it. The problem, and Draco was honest enough with himself, in the privacy of his own head, to call it a problem, was Harry Potter. Not the boy who lived, not the celebrity, not the symbol that everyone else seemed to see when they looked at him. The actual person who had arrived at Hogwarts carrying 10 years of something terrible and was now, somehow, not carrying it the same way he had been 3 weeks ago. Draco had offered his hand on the train and Harry had declined it, which Draco had filed under insult and moved on from. But the declining had not been what he'd expected. He'd expected nervousness, or social awkwardness, or the hedging uncertainty of someone who didn't know where the lines were. Instead Harry had looked at him with clear, direct eyes and said I think I can figure out who the wrong sort are on my own, thanks, and there had been no apology in it, no performance of confidence, just a plain statement of fact. Draco had been thinking about those eyes ever since. He told himself it was a strategic interest. He was not wrong. On a Wednesday morning in early October, Harry found a note on his potions textbook when he arrived for the lesson. It was from Hermione, which he knew before he unfolded it because she was the only person he knew who pressed hard enough with a quill to leave slight indentations on the page. Library, tonight, 8 o'clock. I found something. Bring Ron. Ron, reading over his shoulder with the cheerful absence of any concept of personal space that Harry had come to find genuinely reassuring, made a sound. She's found something, he said. She always sounds like that when she's found something. Like what? Like she's trying to be calm about it but she already knows the answer and she's waiting for us to catch up. Ron settled into his seat. It's an affectionate quality. Does she know you think it's affectionate? Absolutely not, Ron said. She'd make it weird. Harry put the note away and turned to his cauldron and thought about the third-floor corridor, and the way Quirrell's hands shook when he talked about dark creatures, and the specific quality of a secret that was too big for the person carrying it. The library at 8 in the evening was all long shadows and the smell of old parchment, and Hermione had claimed a table in the back corner with the focused territorial energy of a person who has identified the optimal research position. She had 4 books open and a scroll of notes that was already 18 inches long. She looked up when Harry and Ron arrived with the expression of someone who has been waiting not because they're impatient but because they have too much information and nowhere to put it. The third-floor corridor, she said, without preamble. You've been investigating, Harry said. I've been noticing things, she said, which was her preferred framing. There are 3 things. First, Hagrid. He went to Gringotts the same day as us in August, the day we went to get your school things. He took something from a vault. I saw him come out of it. He had a package. You didn't mention this at the time, Ron said. I didn't know it meant anything at the time. She turned the scroll so they could see her notes. Second, there was a break-in at Gringotts the same night we were there. The papers barely covered it, but I found it in the back pages of the Prophet from the week after. The vault was empty, they said nothing was taken, but the vault that was broken into was number, she pointed to a number in her notes. Harry looked at it. He thought about the small, grubby package Hagrid had handled with such careful attention. He moved it, he said. Whatever it is. He took it from Gringotts and brought it here. To the 3rd floor, Hermione said. What's the 3rd thing? Ron asked. Hermione's expression shifted slightly, from triumph to something more complicated. Quirrell, she said. He went to see Snape 2 days ago. I was in the library, near the restricted section. The door to the corridor next to the staff room was open. I heard, not all of it, but enough. She glanced at her notes. Snape said, "How long do you expect me to keep this up?" and Quirrell said something I couldn't hear, and then Snape said, "Your loyalty is to something that will consume you before it's finished with you." The table was quiet for a moment. "Snape's watching Quirrell," Harry said. "Or threatening him," Ron said. "Or both," Harry said. He was quiet for a moment. "There's something on the 3rd floor that someone broke into Gringotts to find. It's being guarded. And Quirrell knows what it is." He looked at his hands. "I need to find out what it is." "We," Hermione said firmly. "Yeah," Ron said. "We. Obviously we." Harry looked at both of them. Ron was leaning back in his chair with his arms folded in the particular way that meant he had already committed and was not looking for a reason to reverse the decision. Hermione had her quill poised over her scroll with the expression of someone adding "investigate 3rd floor corridor" to a list that she fully intended to complete. "I was told something this weekend," Harry said slowly. "By someone I trust. She said don't do it alone, because the things that go wrong when you're alone go wrong all the way." "Who said that?" Ron asked. "Morticia," Harry said. Ron and Hermione exchanged a look. In the 3 weeks since the broadcast, Harry had mentioned the Addamses with increasing frequency, and Ron had arrived at the Addams family the way he arrived at most new information, through a series of increasingly specific questions delivered over meals. He had established that Gomez had once arm-wrestled a basilisk. It was a small one, to be fair, that Wednesday had broken up a duel at the Salem Institute by winning it, and that the house in Wales had a Grindylow in the garden pond who had developed what Gomez called a begrudging mutual respect with the local cormorants. He was firmly of the opinion that the Addamses were brilliant. "Right," he said. "We do it together." "When?" "Not yet," Harry said. "We need to know more before we go near that corridor. We need to know what we're dealing with." He looked at Hermione's notes. "Can you keep researching? Anything about high-security magical objects? Things that would be worth breaking into Gringotts for?" "I'm already doing it," she said, turning the scroll back. "I know," Harry said. "That's why I'm asking you." Hermione looked at him, and then, very briefly, smiled. It was the specific smile of someone who has been recognized for the right reasons. She returned to her books. Ron leaned over to Harry and said, quietly, "She's going to know exactly what it is before we're done with this table tonight." "I know," Harry said again, and went to help with the research. October moved into November with the particular efficiency of a Scottish autumn, which is to say, rapidly and without sentiment. Harry went to Blackthorn Hall every weekend that Morticia or the Ministry didn't intervene with scheduling complications. He went on a Friday evening and came back on Sunday evening, and in between he read, and he walked the cliff path, and he ate food that was abundant and strange and excellent, and he had conversations with the Addamses that were unlike any conversations he'd had before, in the way that real conversations are unlike the transactional exchanges of people who haven't decided yet whether to care about each other. Wednesday taught him to duel. Not formally, there was no appropriate space in Blackthorn Hall for formal dueling, Gomez having converted the most likely room into what he called a recreational explosives laboratory, but practically, in the garden, with cushioning charms on the ground and Wednesday's instruction style, which was direct to the point of surgical. "You lead with your wand hand," she said, the 3rd time they practiced. "It's a reflex. You're telegraphing your first spell before you cast it." "I know," Harry said. "I can't stop it." "Make it useful then," she said. "Lead with your wand hand. Make them think you're casting right. Cast left." Harry tried it. The spell went sideways. Wednesday redirected it without expression. "Again," she said. He tried it 11 more times. On the 12th, it worked, the misdirection landed, the real spell followed before she'd repositioned, and Wednesday took a stupefy to the left shoulder and went down onto the grass with an expression that, on anyone else's face, would have been satisfaction. Harry cast the counter-curse and helped her up. "That worked," he said. "Don't sound surprised," she said. "You knew it would eventually." "I wasn't surprised," he said. I don't know what I was." "You were pleased," she said. "That's allowed." He looked at her. She was brushing grass off her sleeve with the focused disinterest of someone who had not just been knocked down and found nothing worth commenting on in it. "You fall down and you don't even blink," he said. "Falling down is part of training," she said. "You fall down, you get up, you figure out what happened. The only version where falling down matters is the version where you don't get up." Harry thought about this for a moment. Then, "Is that what your mother taught you?" "Partly," Wednesday said. "Partly it's just, if you're afraid of falling, you don't try the things that might make you fall, and those are usually the interesting things." They walked back toward the house. The afternoon was cold and grey and the sea was invisible behind a low mist, and the topiary in the garden had continued its autonomous development and was now forming shapes that were either deeply abstract or had once been animals and had reconsidered. "Can I ask you something?" Harry said. "You always do," Wednesday said, which was not a refusal. "Your family, the way you are. The way you just exist. Like you don't need anyone's approval for anything. Was that always true, or did you have to learn it?" Wednesday was quiet for several steps. "We were raised," she said, "to believe that the things that make us strange are the best things about us. That the world finds us alarming and that this is the world's problem." She paused. "Mother says that people who need you to be less than you are have confused their comfort with your obligation. And you believe that?" "I've never had a reason not to," she said. "Then, but I think for you it's different. You were raised to believe the opposite. So it's not about learning a new idea. It's about dismantling something that was built in you without your consent." Harry didn't say anything. "That's harder," she said. "But it's not impossible. I've watched you this month. You're already different than you were at the cliff." "How?" "Your hands," she said simply. He looked at his hands. She was right, and he knew she was right, and the fact that she'd noticed, the fact that she had been paying attention with enough precision to see something that specific, did something to the space behind his sternum that he didn't have language for yet. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," she said. "I find you interesting. It's not charity." The Monday after Halloween, Harry arrived at Potions with Ron and Hermione and something new behind his eyes. The troll had happened the night before. Hermione would say, later, that she wasn't sure which of the three of them had been most useful. Harry had tackled the thing directly and wandlessly knocked it sideways using a levitation charm on its own club while Ron held its attention and Hermione, to her own surprise, had cast a finite that cancelled the confusion charm that had driven the troll into the girls' bathroom in the first place, revealing that it hadn't wandered in by accident. Someone had let it in. They hadn't told anyone this. Not yet. They had looked at each other over the unconscious troll and made the silent agreement of three people who have been in a small crisis together and know that the people they'd report it to are not all on the same side of whatever this is. Harry walked into Potions and took his seat, and when Snape swept in and began the lesson with a cutting observation about the general intelligence level of students who had attended the Halloween feast rather than staying in their dormitories during a security alert, Harry looked up and said, "The troll didn't wander in." The dungeon went quiet. Snape turned. The expression on his face was several things at once, most of them controlled, but somewhere underneath the control was something that snapped to attention. "What did you say, Potter?" "The troll didn't wander in by accident," Harry said. He was not confrontational. He was not performing confidence. He was simply saying what he knew, in the even voice of someone who has decided that performing ignorance is a waste of time. "Someone let it in. We were in the bathroom when it went down. The confusion charm broke when Hermione cancelled it, which means the troll was running one specific direction, not wandering. That is a significant accusation, Snape said. I know, Harry said. I'm not accusing anyone specific. I'm just saying it wasn't accidental. The dungeon remained quiet. Draco, 3 seats over, was looking at Harry with the expression that Harry had begun to recognize, the one that appeared whenever Harry did something that didn't fit Draco's model of what Harry was supposed to be. Snape looked at Harry for a long moment. Then he turned back to the board. Take notes, he said, which was not a dismissal. From Snape, Harry was learning, take notes in a particular tone meant this conversation is not over, I'm choosing when to continue it. After class, as students filed out, Snape said, Potter. Stay. Ron and Hermione waited in the corridor. Harry stayed. Snape stood at his desk and looked at him with the evaluating attention that he deployed differently than most teachers. Most teachers looked at students and saw their potential in the context of the subject. Snape looked at students and saw the person, which he then chose to do something cold and exacting with, but the seeing itself was real. How did you know the confusion charm had been cast? He asked. Not sternly. Like a question that had a correct answer and he wanted to see if Harry had it. It was too specific, Harry said. Trolls are big and they're destructive but they follow disturbances, sound, movement, smell. They don't go to specific rooms. They wander. This one went directly to the girls' bathroom and stayed there until the charm broke. Something was directing it. And you know this how? Book, Harry said. Blackthorn Hall Library. Fantastical Beasts and Their Applications in Dark Practice. There's a chapter. Snape's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The Addams Library, he said. It wasn't quite a question. Yeah. A pause. Snape picked up a piece of chalk and turned it in his fingers, a rare idle gesture, the kind that means a person is thinking rather than managing. I would advise you, he said, to be careful about what you say and to whom. The castle has ears in unexpected places. I know, Harry said. And I would advise you further that the investigation you and your friends are clearly conducting is not, unobserved. Harry looked at him steadily. By you? Snape said nothing, which was its own answer. Are you trying to stop it? Harry asked. Another silence. Then, I am trying to ensure that the people who are supposed to stop it do so before an 11-year-old boy finds himself in a situation that no 11-year-old should be in. Harry thought about this. He thought about the conversation Hermione had overheard, and your loyalty is to something that will consume you, and the way Snape moved through the school with the careful attention of someone who knew more than he was showing. You're watching Quirrell, Harry said. Snape's expression did not change. Go to class, Potter. Harry went to class. But he looked back once, from the doorway, and Snape was standing at his desk still turning the chalk, and the expression on his face, for just that one unguarded second, was the expression of a man who is carrying something heavy and has been carrying it for a very long time. He told Morticia about it on the Friday. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things he'd come to rely on. She didn't manage his version of events while he was telling it. She waited until he was finished and then she asked questions, and her questions were always the ones that cut to what mattered. You trust him, she said. Not exactly, Harry said. I don't think he means me harm. And I think he knows what's on the 3rd floor. But he hasn't told anyone. I don't think he knows what to do with what he knows, Harry said. Like he's figured out there's a problem but he doesn't have enough proof yet, and in the meantime he's watching. Morticia looked at the fire. The object in the 3rd floor corridor, she said. Hermione's research. She thinks it's a philosopher's stone, Harry said. She found references. Alchemy texts, mostly. There's a man called Nicholas Flamel, she found his name in an index in one of Dumbledore's old papers, connected to research on the stone. And the stone does what, specifically? Turns things to gold, Harry said. And produces something called the elixir of life, which can make you immortal. He waited while she processed this. Someone is trying to steal it, she said. Someone who wants to live forever, Harry said. Or someone who wants to give it to someone who needs it to survive. Morticia looked at him sharply. Voldemort, Harry said. He said the name the way he'd started saying it, without flinching, with the flat directness of someone who has decided that fear of a word is the first available leverage, and he doesn't intend to offer it. He'd started doing it after Wednesday had noted, very casually, that people who are afraid of saying something hand power over that thing to whoever isn't afraid of saying it. He's not dead. He wasn't destroyed when he didn't kill me. He touched his scar, a habit not of self-consciousness but of thinking. He needs the stone to come back properly. And he's using Quirrell, Morticia said. I think so. The fire crackled. Outside, the November wind hit the windows with the insistence of something that wanted in. Morticia was quiet for long enough that Harry, a month ago, would have started to fill the silence. He didn't now. He'd learned her quiet. I'm going to tell Dumbledore, she said. He already knows, Harry said. He set up the protections on the stone. He knows it's there. I think he's waiting for something. What? I don't know, Harry said. But it feels like he's arranged things. The protections, the warnings, the way he talks about the corridor. He paused. Like he's set up a situation and he's waiting for someone to walk into it. Morticia turned to look at him with the particular focus she brought to things that mattered. He's waiting for you, she said. The fire. The wind. The words sitting in the room. Yeah, Harry said. I think so. Then we need to change what he's waiting for, Morticia said. Not with anger. With the particular precision of someone who has identified the mechanism of a problem and is already thinking about the tool. Saturday morning brought the Wisengamot's formal notification of the 6-week review, which Blishwick had been expecting and had prepared for extensively. It also brought a brief, pointed letter from Lucius Malfoy's solicitors, not to Blishwick but to Morticia directly, which was either an insult or a test and functioned as both. The letter expressed, in the elaborate language of pure-blood wizarding legal correspondence, that the Malfoy family's concern regarding the guardianship arrangement was primarily focused on Harry's cultural continuity and appropriate magical upbringing, and that a family with no formal standing in the British wizarding community, and specifically, a family whose magical tradition was unclassified by ministry standards, could not be expected to provide the environment that a child of Harry's significance required. Morticia read it at breakfast. She set it down and ate a piece of toast. Well? Gomez said. He's going to push for a cultural assessment, she said. He'll bring a panel to evaluate our household and our practices and our bloodline status. Our bloodline is excellent, Gomez said, with the mild confidence of a man whose family tree contains things that most wizarding families would not put in a family tree. By his standards, Morticia said, we are unclassified. We are, Gomez agreed. I've always found the unclassified category the most interesting one. Harry was watching them from his end of the table with the focused attention he brought to everything they did, like someone who is learning a language through immersion and is beginning to pick up not just the words but the grammar. What does unclassified mean? He asked. The British Ministry classifies wizarding families, Morticia said. Pure blood, half-blood, muggle-born. Old families, new families. They have a register. She paused. The Addams family predates the registry. Our magical tradition is older than the ministry and does not conform to their classification system. That bothers them, Harry said. Not a question. Things that don't fit their categories bother them profoundly, Morticia said. Which is, of course, their problem. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then, Draco Malfoy said something to me this week. Both Addamses looked at him. He said, it was after potions, he pulled me aside in the corridor. He said that his father's challenge to the guardianship wasn't personal. That his father wanted, Harry stopped. Reconstructed it. My father wants to ensure the proper parties have a say in your upbringing. His exact words. Harry paused. He looked like he was repeating something he'd been told to say. What did you say back? Wednesday asked. She'd come downstairs silently and was now leaning in the doorway with a piece of toast, having apparently heard enough of the conversation to find it worth joining. I said, "Tell your father I'm fine," Harry said. Wednesday looked at him. That's it? I smiled when I said it. Wednesday's expression shifted very slightly. What kind of smile? The kind, Harry said, that makes people not sure if you're being polite or if you're warning them. Wednesday bit her toast. Good, she said. Gomez put his hand over his face with the expression of a man overcome by emotion he finds extremely pleasant. Morticia looked at Harry with something in her eyes that was different from how she'd looked at him in the first weeks, less assessment, more recognition. The recognition of a quality she'd suspected was there, now confirming itself. Malfoy will make his move at the review, she said. He'll bring the cultural assessment argument with specific precedents and a panel he's already selected. He's had these 6 weeks to prepare it. So have we, Gomez said. Yes, Morticia said. We have. She picked up the letter and folded it with neat, precise movements and set it on the pile with the other correspondence and returned to her tea, and outside the grey November morning settled around Blackthorn Hall like a patient thing, and the topiary continued its autonomous evolution in the garden, and Gerald circled the ornamental pond with the slow, deliberate patience of something that has been waiting a long time and is very good at it. Sunday evening, at the Hogwarts gates, Morticia said, the review is the 17th. I'll need you to write something for Blishwick, not formal, not a statement. Just, what this has been. In your words. Harry looked at her. What this has been, he said. Yes. He was quiet, looking at the gate. Then, I'll write it tonight. It doesn't have to be long. It won't be, he said. But I know what I want to say. He looked at her and then at Gomez, and then did something he hadn't done in the previous 5 weekends. He stepped forward and hugged Gomez, quickly, with the deliberate decisiveness of someone who has decided to do a thing before they think about it too carefully. Gomez made a sound like a man receiving something he wanted very much and wrapped his arms around Harry with the thoroughness of a man who has never believed in half-measures. Harry stepped back. He looked at Morticia. She opened her arms. He hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, 2 seconds of every learned reflex saying wait, evaluate, make sure, and then he stepped in, and Morticia held him with the particular certainty of someone who does not hold things loosely. 17th, Harry said, muffled against her shoulder. 17th, she confirmed. He stepped back, and turned, and went through the gate, and McGonagall, who had been a discreet 20 feet back and had been very busy looking at something other than the gate, cleared her throat and said, I trust the weekend was satisfactory. Yes, Professor, Harry said. Good, she said. Come along. They walked up through the castle, and the corridors were bright with torchlight and the sounds of students in common rooms, and the smell of old magic was something Harry recognized now rather than just noticed, the smell of a place that had been waiting for him in the specific way that places that are home wait for the people who belong in them. He went upstairs. He found parchment and quill and sat on his bed and wrote what Morticia had asked for, in his own words, and it was not long. But when he read it back, it was true. Which was, he was beginning to understand, the only measure that mattered. Chapter 4, The Art of Making Enemies Properly. The Wizengamot review chamber was a different room from the one they'd used for the provisional hearing. Smaller, more deliberate in its architecture, the kind of room that had been designed to make people feel the weight of institutional authority without the grandeur that might make them feel inspired by it. It wanted you compliant, not elevated. Morticia had noted this the moment she walked in. She sat at the petitioner's table with Blishwick on her left and Gomez on her right, and she wore black, which she always wore, and she had her hands folded on the table in front of her in the manner of someone who is not performing calm but simply is it. The gallery above held perhaps 30 observers, journalists, ministry officials, several Wisengamot members not sitting on today's panel, and at least 4 people she recognized as connected to the Malfoy network, there to observe and report back. The panel was 7 members. 3 were broadly sympathetic. Blishwick had done his research thoroughly. 2 were Malfoy-aligned, which they'd expected. 1 was a woman named Griselda Marchbanks who was reportedly incorruptible and had her own opinions about everything, which Morticia had decided was either the best or most interesting variable in the room. The 7th was the senior panelist, a heavy-set man named Tiberius Ogden who had the expression of someone who has been doing this for 40 years and has seen every version of every argument and is waiting to be surprised. Across the chamber, at the opposing table, sat Lucius Malfoy. This was the first time Morticia had seen him in person. She had formed a picture from letters and correspondence and the things Harry and McGonagall and Blishwick had told her, and the picture had been accurate as far as it went. He was tall, composed, expensive in every deliberate particular. He had the kind of face that had learned to do its emoting in extremely small increments, which was a skill she respected even when she didn't respect the person exercising it. He looked at her when she came in. She looked back. Neither of them looked away. This lasted approximately 4 seconds, after which Malfoy's solicitor touched his arm with something on a piece of parchment and he redirected. Morticia returned her attention to the panel. Gomez leaned slightly toward her. "I like him already," he murmured. "He has style. It's entirely in service of very unpleasant objectives, but the style itself is admirable." "Focus," Morticia said. "I am focused," Gomez said. Appreciating the opposition is part of focusing. Blishwick, on her other side, was arranging his papers with the practiced calm of a man who has appeared before more contentious panels than this and won the majority. He had the quality of a person whose confidence is rooted not in ego but in preparation, and Morticia found it quietly fortifying. Tiberius Ogden called the session to order. Malfoy's solicitor, a precise, blade-thin man named Yaxley Croft, opened with the cultural assessment argument exactly as Morticia had predicted. It was well constructed. He had precedents going back to 1821, he had ministry documentation classifying the Addams family as unregistered foreign magical practitioners, and he had a panel of 3 wizarding cultural experts he wanted to call, each of whom would testify that Harry Potter's magical education and cultural development required grounding in the British wizarding tradition. He spent 40 minutes on it. He was good. Morticia listened to the whole thing without expression. When Blishwick rose to respond, he did something she had specifically asked him to do. He started with the documentation, not the argument. Financial records. Property assessments. The letters from American wizarding institutions. The Salem Institute's full academic endorsement, unedited this time. She decided the editing had been overly cautious. A letter from the New Orleans Council of Magical Practice. A letter from the Argentine Consejo de Magia, where Gomez had studied for 3 years in his 20s. Then the letter from Thing. Ogden looked at the letter. He looked at Blishwick. "This reference," he said, "is from a disembodied hand." "Thing is a valued member of the Addams household," Blishwick said, with complete professionalism. "He has been for 43 years. He is attesting to the domestic environment of the household, which is within the scope of the review criteria under Section 7 of the Guardianship Assessment Standards." "The handwriting is excellent," Griselda Marchbanks said, reading the letter. "It is," Blishwick agreed. Ogden set the letter down and moved on. The cultural experts testified. They were thorough and clearly prepared and said the things they'd been asked to say about British wizarding heritage and cultural continuity and the importance of appropriate environmental grounding for a child of significance. Morticia noted the specific phrases that recurred across all 3 testimonies: child of significance, appropriate environment, British tradition, and counted the number of times Harry Potter's actual stated preferences were mentioned. 0. When the last expert finished, Ogden asked if the petitioners wished to respond. Morticia stood. Blishwick had not expected this. They'd discussed it, he'd prepared a response, and she had said she might want to speak and he'd filed it under client preference and prepared accordingly. But he sat back with the practiced grace of a lawyer who knows when his client is the better advocate. The panel has heard 3 experts speak at length about what Harry Potter needs, Morticia said. I'd like to submit one document. She placed a single piece of parchment on the table. Ogden's clerk collected it and passed it to the panel. It was Harry's letter. Written on a Sunday evening in his dormitory at Hogwarts in the handwriting of an 11-year-old boy, in his own words, which were not formal and were not strategically constructed and were, precisely as she'd asked, simply true. The chamber was quiet while the panel read it. Marchbanks read it twice. One of the Malfoy-aligned members read it and set it down with the careful neutrality of someone who has been given something that complicates their position and is deciding how to manage that. Ogden read it. He read it the way he read things, without expression, but slowly, which in Morticia's assessment meant it was landing. She waited. I would like to read a section of this aloud, Marchbanks said, for the record. She didn't wait for Ogden's nod. The child writes, I don't know much about what families are supposed to feel like. I've read about them and seen them in films but I haven't had one. What I know is that at Blackthorn Hall I have eaten every meal. I have read books from a library that belongs to me as much as anyone. I have sat on a cliff and talked to someone who told me the truth. I have been corrected and argued with and taught things that no one told me were important. I have not been told to disappear. I have not been told I was too much. Marchbanks set the parchment down. These might seem like small things. They are not small things. The chamber was very quiet. Yaxleycroft rose. The emotional content of a child's letter, while sympathetic, sit down, Ogden said. Yaxleycroft sat down. Ogden looked at the panel. He looked at Morticia. He looked at Lucius Malfoy, who had not moved during the reading and whose expression had not changed, and this itself was revealing. The effort required to not change expression when a child's letter is being read aloud is visible to people who know how to look. The panel will deliberate, Ogden said. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. In the corridor outside the chamber, Gomez bought 2 cups of something from a trolley and handed one to Morticia. They stood against the wall in companionable silence while Blishwick reviewed his notes nearby. Malfoy came out of the chamber and walked toward them with the measured inevitability of a man who has decided to have a conversation and is choosing the terms. He stopped at a distance that was courteous and also strategic. Mrs. Addams, he said. Then, Mr. Addams. Lucius, Gomez said, with genuine warmth. Excellent presentation. Your solicitor has real flair. The 1821 precedent was a particularly nice touch, though I notice Blishwick had a counterargument ready that he didn't end up needing. Did you want to hear what it was? I thought it was brilliant. Malfoy's expression adjusted slightly. He directed his attention to Morticia. I respect what you're doing, he said. I want to be clear about that. No you don't, Morticia said pleasantly. A pause. I beg your pardon. You respect that I am an effective opponent, she said. That's different from respecting what I'm doing. What I'm doing is providing a child with a home. You oppose that for reasons that have nothing to do with the child. She looked at him steadily. You oppose it because Harry Potter in the hands of the right family, by your definition, becomes a political and social instrument that can be aimed in directions that benefit you. Harry Potter in our hands becomes something you can't use. She tilted her head very slightly. I find it clarifying that these are the same concern for you. Malfoy looked at her. His expression had the quality of something being recalibrated, not defeat, not concession, but the specific adjustment of someone who has encountered a different order of opponent than expected and is revising their approach. The boy needs guidance, he said. The wizarding world is complex. His significance, Morticia said, is something that has been used to justify 10 years of negligence. His significance has been invoked every time someone needed a reason not to look too closely at his circumstances. I am not interested in his significance. I am interested in him. Malfoy was quiet. We're going to win today, Morticia said. Not because we're more powerful or more well-connected, though both of those things are true, but because a panel of reasonable people have just heard a boy describe, in his own words, what it is to finally be seen. And there is no legal precedent, no cultural assessment, no registry classification that defeats that. She picked up her cup. I'd suggest using the time between today and whatever your next approach is to consider whether the energy could be directed somewhere more productive. She walked back toward Blishwick's end of the corridor. Gomez lingered for a moment, regarding Malfoy with the cheerful consideration of a man examining something he finds genuinely interesting. She's right, you know, he said. She always is. It's one of the things I find most attractive about her. He paused. Your son, by the way, Draco. He's been watching Harry all term with the expression of someone who hasn't decided yet what he's looking at. I find that encouraging. Means he's still thinking. He clapped Malfoy on the arm with the easy authority of a man who does not observe personal space conventions when he doesn't feel like it. You could let the boy think, Lucius. See where it goes. He walked away. Malfoy stood in the corridor for a long moment, which was not something Lucius Malfoy typically did. The panel voted 5-2. Permanent guardianship of Harry James Potter was granted to Morticia and Gomez Addams, with the standard provisions for schooling and welfare review. The two dissenting votes were the Malfoy-aligned members. Griselda Marchbanks voted in favor and said, when Ogden noted the vote was recorded, that she had no further comment, which from Marchbanks was reportedly the equivalent of a standing ovation. Blishwick shook Morticia's hand and then Gomez's hand and then couldn't find words, which for a solicitor was striking. Gomez clasped his shoulder and said something in Spanish that made Blishwick laugh unexpectedly. Morticia stood in the chamber and let the moment be what it was. Then she went to find an owl to send to Harry. Harry was in charms when the owl arrived. Flitwick, to his enormous credit, allowed it. He'd been following the guardianship case in The Prophet with the private emotional engagement of a man who had taught generations of children and had some feelings about what had come out of the Sorting Hat that September evening, and when the large black owl dropped a letter on Harry's desk in the middle of a lesson on summoning charms, Flitwick said, "Go ahead, Mr. Potter," before Harry had even looked at the envelope. He read it. It was 5 words. It's done. Come home soon. Harry held the letter and looked at it and did not, because he was in a classroom with 20 other people and he had very thorough reflexes about not showing what he was feeling, react visibly. But something happened in his face that was private and real and that Ron, next to him, saw and understood, because Ron was not clever in the way Hermione was clever but he was extraordinarily good at people, particularly people he cared about, and he'd been watching Harry all term with the quiet attention of a friend who has decided that what you need is someone in your corner rather than someone asking how you're doing. Ron put his hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, a quick solid pressure, and then returned to his wand work without saying anything. Harry folded the letter and put it in his pocket next to the black and silver card and turned back to the lesson. Come home soon. 2 months ago he hadn't had anywhere to go. Flitwick called on him for the next demonstration and Harry cast the summoning charm cleanly, first try, and the textbook across the room flew into his hand with a satisfying smack. Excellent, Mr. Potter, Flitwick said, beaming. Excellent. Draco Malfoy found Harry at dinner. This was notable because Draco finding Harry at anything required crossing the invisible boundary between Slytherin and Gryffindor territory in the Great Hall, which was not typically done, and the doing of it attracted the attention that Draco was presumably aware it would attract and had chosen to accept, which meant he wanted Harry to know he'd chosen to accept it, which meant the conversation mattered to him. Harry registered all of this and waited. Draco stopped beside the Gryffindor table. He had the expression he'd been wearing more frequently lately, the one where he was trying to look certain and was mostly succeeding, but underneath it was something that wasn't certain at all. My father lost the review, Draco said. I heard, Harry said. I'm not here because of that. He stopped. Restarted with slightly different architecture. He wrote to me. After. He said the Addams woman was formidable and that he expected the next stage of his approach would take longer. A pause. I thought you should know he hasn't stopped. Harry looked at him. Why are you telling me? Draco's jaw tightened slightly. Because you should know. That's not why, Harry said. The tension in Draco's jaw increased fractionally and then, almost imperceptibly, relaxed. He looked like a person who has been given the option to stop performing and isn't sure if he trusts it. My father's interest in you is entirely to do with what you represent, he said. Not you specifically. The symbol. The politics. He paused. I find the distinction important. You're saying your interest is different. I'm saying my father would control you if he could, and I have spent the last 2 months watching you be someone who can't be controlled, and I find that, he stopped. Interesting. Harry offered. Yes, Draco said. More quietly, yes. Harry studied him for a long moment with the direct, clear assessment that Draco had never stopped finding disconcerting. Ron, next to Harry, had gone very still with the alert stillness of someone ready to respond to developments. Hermione had looked up from her book. You could sit down, Harry said. Draco's expression moved through several things quickly. At the Gryffindor table, he said. You've already crossed the room, Harry said. The damage is done. A beat. Then Draco sat. Not next to Harry, one person down, which was the right distance, acknowledging the territory without claiming it, and picked up a bread roll with the deliberate casualness of someone using an action to paper over the enormity of what they've just done. Ron stared. Then he visibly decided that Harry would handle it and return to his food, which was a level of social trust that Harry found remarkable and was grateful for. What do you know about Quirrell? Harry said, quietly enough that it didn't carry. Draco's hand paused on the bread roll. Just slightly. What makes you think I know anything? Slytherin common room is in the dungeons, Harry said. Snape's office is in the dungeons. Teachers talk. Slytherin students overhear things. That's a generous theory of Slytherin intelligence. It's accurate, Hermione said, without looking up. Draco looked at her with the expression of someone recalibrating a prejudice in real time and finding it uncomfortable. Then he looked back at Harry. Quirrell goes to the 3rd floor twice a week, he said, very quietly. Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings. He never takes anyone with him, and he always comes back looking, like what? Like something's talking to him that he can't tune out. The three of them were quiet with that for a moment. Does Snape know? Ron asked, which for Ron was quite a perceptive question, and Hermione looked at him with appreciation. Snape knows everything that happens in the dungeons, Draco said. He said it with the particular certainty of someone whose experience of Snape has been more complex than Harry's. He doesn't miss things. He's watching Quirrell, Harry said. Yes, Draco said. And I think, he stopped. Looked at the table. Then looked up with the expression of someone who has made a decision about what kind of person they want to be in this specific moment. I think Quirrell knows my father. Not recently. Before. When, before things changed. I heard Snape say something to Flitwick once, when they didn't know I was in the corridor. He said, the man Quirrell was is not the man who came back from Albania. The word Albania landed like something specific, like a coordinate rather than a country. Albania, Hermione said, barely a breath. Harry looked at her. I'll look tonight, she said. She found it in 40 minutes in the restricted section, using the signed permission slip she'd obtained from Flitwick on the completely honest basis that she was doing advanced research into magical theory and needed access to the historical dark arts index. Shadows in the East, A History of Displaced Dark Magic, Chapter 11, which covered known locations of dormant dark entities following the events of 1981. Albania was mentioned twice. Harry read it in the library while Ron kept watch and the candles burned low, and outside the library windows the November night pressed against the glass. Reports from the Albanian magical community following the events of October 1981 suggest that residual dark magical presence was detected in the forests of the eastern region. Several aura investigations were conducted between 1982 and 1984, each inconclusive. The entity, if present, demonstrated no activity consistent with corporeal existence and was classified as dormant. He went to Albania, Harry said. Quirrell. He went looking for something, and he found it. He found him, Hermione said. And came back different. Because he came back with a passenger, Harry said. Ron made a sound. So Quirrell's, what, possessed? Something like that, Hermione said. The dark arts texts describe several cases of partial possession, not full, not like a complete takeover. More like, a parasite, Harry said. Yes. She looked at her notes. The host retains partial autonomy. Enough to function. The possessing entity directs them toward specific objectives but can't act independently without a body. The stone, Harry said. He needs the stone to get a body. And Quirrell is his way into the school, Ron said. He's already inside. He already has access. Harry stared at the page. He thought about Quirrell's shaking hands. He thought about the smell in the defense classroom that he'd noticed and filed away, a cold smell, underneath the garlic, something chemical and dark. He thought about Snape moving through the school like a man who knows exactly what is wrong and is doing the precise mathematics of when to intervene. He thought about what Morticia had said, the things that go wrong when you're alone go wrong all the way. We need to tell someone, he said. Dumbledore? Ron said. Snape already knows and he's watching, Harry said. Dumbledore set up the protections, which means he knows something is at risk. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to write to Morticia. Hermione looked at him. Your guardian? She knows about this, Harry said. I told her what I knew in October. She's been thinking about it since. And she has resources that, he stopped. Reconsidered. She's coming for the Hogwarts board meeting on the 14th. She was already planning to come. The board meeting's in 2 weeks, Hermione said. Then I write tonight and she comes prepared, Harry said. He rolled up the parchment they'd been using for notes and tucked it under his arm. Come on, he said. Before Filch does his late rounds. They went back through the darkened castle, Harry leading, Ron navigating by some internal cartographic sense he'd developed growing up hearing his brother's descriptions of Hogwarts, Hermione walking precisely in the middle with her hand on her wand, and the corridors were cold and empty and full of the castle's nighttime sounds, which were different from the daytime sounds the way all old buildings are different at night, when they stop performing for their occupants and simply exist. They reached the portrait of the fat lady without incident. Harry spoke the password and they went through, and the common room was warm and mostly empty and someone had left a plate of biscuits on the table near the fire, which Ron descended on with the immediate commitment of a person who has been doing research for hours and has certain needs. Harry sat by the fire and wrote to Morticia. He wrote everything. The Albania reference, Draco's information about Quirrell's visits to the 3rd floor, Hermione's theory about partial possession, the way Snape moved through all of this with the careful attention of someone who already knew the shape of it. He wrote quickly, because the thoughts were ordered in his head and writing quickly was one of the things Morticia had told him, not explicitly, but by example, was actually a form of clarity rather than carelessness. He ended with, I don't think it's going to wait much longer. Whatever he's planning, it's moving faster. Quirrell looked wrong today at breakfast, like something was pushing through. He folded it. He thought for a moment and then added, on the outside of the fold, I'm not frightened. I just want you to know what's happening. He sent it with the school owls at midnight, and went to bed, and slept better than he had any right to. Morticia received the letter at 6 in the morning at Blackthorn Hall. She read it at the kitchen table with her black tea and the particular stillness of someone processing information that has confirmed what she'd already partly constructed. Gomez was asleep. Wednesday was, probably asleep. Probably. She set down the letter and looked at the garden through the kitchen window. Gerald circled the pond in the grey early light, and the topiary cast long shadows on the lawn, and Blackthorn Hall was quiet in the specific way of a house that has been inhabited long enough to have its own resting breath. She picked up her quill. She wrote 3 letters. One to Blishwick, regarding the Hogwarts board meeting preparation. She'd been attending as part of the guardianship conditions, and the meeting agenda needed to be expanded to include a formal inquiry into staffing and security, which she had the standing to request. One to a contact in the American Wizarding Regulatory Office named Vivian Crow, who had spent 20 years studying dark magical entities and their methods of transference, and who owed Morticia a conversation. And one to Harry. Short, as her letters to him tended to be when they were about something serious, because she'd learned that he received brevity as a form of respect. I'll be there on the 14th. Earlier, if it moves. Keep your friends close. Trust Snape's timing. I think his calculation is the right one, but the variables are changing. You won't have to go to the corridor alone. You were right not to be frightened. Fear and caution are not the same thing. Use the second. Don't let anyone sell you the first. We're coming. She sealed the letters and went to wake Gomez. The Hogwarts board meeting was in the 3rd floor conference room, not, Harry noted with some irony, the 3rd floor corridor, but close enough that on the way from the main staircase to the meeting room you passed the locked door, and the locked door did what it always did, which was radiate the specific cold presence of something being guarded. Morticia arrived at 11. She came through the main gates with Gomez and Blishwick, and she looked exactly like herself, which was to say that she walked into Hogwarts as if the castle had been expecting her, which it had, in the way that old buildings recognize certain kinds of people. Harry was waiting in the entrance hall. She saw him and crossed to him without slowing, and he, without the 2-second pause this time, without the checking and recalibrating, hugged her, and she held him for a moment with the same certainty she always held things, and then she stepped back and looked at him with the focused attention of someone who is reading the current state of a person they know well. You look tired, she said. I haven't been sleeping as well this week, he said. Since the letter. The information is active now instead of theoretical, she said. That's why. Your brain is trying to plan. Is that what it is? Yes. Let it. She put one hand briefly on his shoulder. Walk with me. Tell me what's changed since Wednesday's letter. They walked through the corridor together, Gomez and Blishwick behind them, and Harry talked, quietly, efficiently, the way he'd learned to talk to her, without preamble or performance, just the facts and his reading of the facts. Quirrell had not appeared at breakfast that morning. Snape had looked at the empty defense chair with an expression Harry had only seen on him once before, when a complicated potions formula went precisely right on the first try, the expression of a man whose prediction has been confirmed and is not pleased by this. The 3rd floor corridor had been cold this morning in a way that was different from cold. Harry had walked past it on the way down and felt, not fear, exactly. More like recognition. Like something on the other side of the door knew he was there. Morticia listened to all of it without interrupting. The board meeting, she said, when he'd finished. I'm going to raise security and staffing. I have the standing to demand a formal review of current staff security clearances, which will put Quirrell under official scrutiny that Dumbledore will have to respond to. Will Dumbledore resist it? He'll manage it, she said. Which is different. He'll try to contain it within channels he controls. She paused. That's fine. The containment will slow things down, and slowing things down is what we need right now. What do we need time for? For me to talk to Snape, she said. Harry looked at her. You're going to talk to Snape. He's the one with the complete picture, she said. And he's been carrying it alone. That's a precarious position. She glanced at Harry. He'll say something dismissive and unpleasant when I approach him. Yeah, Harry agreed. That's fine, she said again. I'm not approaching him for the conversation he'll choose to have. I'm approaching him for the one he's been having with himself. The board meeting lasted 2 hours. Harry wasn't in it. He sat in the corridor outside with Ron and Hermione, who had both been excused from double herbology on the basis of a note from Blishwick that Hermione found legally impressive and Ron found just generally brilliant, and they talked in low voices and ate the biscuits Ron had thought to bring from the common room. Inside the meeting room, they could hear voices but not words, the rise and fall of argument, the specific cadence of institutional debate, and once, cutting through everything with the clarity of someone who doesn't need volume to be heard, Morticia's voice making a point that must have landed precisely right because it was followed by a silence that lasted long enough to be meaningful. "She's good," Ron said, after the third silence. "She's the best," Harry said, without qualification. Hermione looked at him. She'd been looking at him with the particular expression she wore when she was noticing something and deciding whether to name it, which usually resolved into naming it. "You're different," she said. "I know," he said. "I mean specifically, you're not worried about the board meeting. 2 months ago you'd have been sitting here watching that door like it had the answers to everything." 2 months ago it did, Harry said. "Now there's someone in there who knows what she's doing and I don't need to watch the door because she's handling the door." Hermione considered this. "That's what having people is like," she said. "Yeah," Harry said. "I'm figuring that out." Ron offered them both a biscuit. They took them, and the corridor was cold and old and they sat in it together, and on the other side of the meeting room door Morticia was doing what she'd come to do, and on the other side of the locked corridor the darkness waited with the patient inevitability of something that knew its time was coming. And Harry ate his biscuit and thought about the Philosopher's Stone and about Snape's face at breakfast and about the letter in his pocket that said "We're coming," and he thought, not yet. But soon. After the meeting, Morticia found Snape. She didn't contrive an encounter. She simply walked to the dungeons. Gomez stayed upstairs with Harry, which was not a coincidence, and knocked on Snape's office door with the knock of someone who is not asking to be admitted so much as notifying him of her arrival. He opened the door and looked at her with the expression Harry had described accurately, layered contempt, and underneath it, cautious assessment. "Mrs. Addams," he said. "I'm not available for parent consultations today." "I'm not here as a parent," she said. "I'm here as the person who currently has the fullest picture outside of yourself of what is happening on the 3rd floor." She paused. "May I come in?" A silence that lasted precisely long enough to establish that he was choosing whether to let her in rather than being managed into it. He stepped back. She came in. His office was exactly what Harry had described, cold, atmospheric, the kind of room that had developed a personality from decades of its occupants' habits. The ingredients shelves, the desk stacked with student essays, the small personal items that were personal only in the sense that they'd been placed rather than randomly accumulated, a book left open at a specific page, a portrait on the wall of a woman with dark eyes that Morticia noted and did not ask about. She sat, without being invited. He sat across the desk. "You know what's possessing Quirrell," she said. "I know what I suspect," he said. "You know," she said. "Your certainty is visible to anyone paying attention, and I've been paying attention since the night of the broadcast." She looked at him steadily. "You're waiting for Dumbledore to act and you've been waiting since September and whatever calculation he's running is one you don't fully agree with but you're not positioned to override." Snape said nothing. "The stone cannot leave this castle with Quirrell," she said. "We both know what it would mean if it did." "I'm aware of what it would mean," Snape said, with the precise diction of a man exercising restraint. "Then we agree on the objective." She folded her hands. "I'm not asking you to tell me Dumbledore's plan. I'm telling you that if the situation resolves itself before the plan is ready, I will be available. Harry will not go to that corridor alone. Harry," Snape said, "should not go to that corridor at all." "No," she agreed. "He shouldn't. But we are both in the position of knowing things about Harry Potter that the people who built this situation did not account for, and one of those things is that he will not stand by while something happens that he believes he can affect." She paused. "I'm not asking you to like that. I'm asking you to include it in your calculation." Snape looked at her across the desk. He looked at her the way he looked at things he was taking seriously, completely, with none of the performance of civility or contempt. "You are not what I expected," he said. "No," she said. "I'm told that frequently. What is it you want from me?" "One thing," she said. "When it moves, when you know it's moving, send word. Not to Dumbledore first. To me first. Give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes, he said. 10 minutes is enough, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the desk, at the essays, at the open book, at the window that showed the dungeon wall and nothing else. "I'm not in the habit," he said, "of trusting people quickly." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to use me." She stood. "There's a difference." She walked to the door. She stopped, because she'd seen the portrait again, and something about the eyes, dark, watchful, with the specific quality of someone who was used to watching and had made peace with it, made her pause. "She looks like someone who understood the cost of things," Morticia said. Snape's voice, when it came, was very quiet. "She did," he said. Morticia nodded once, and left. Harry was in the entrance hall when she came back up from the dungeons. He read her face, or rather, read the specific quality of her composure, which told him what he needed to know without her needing to say it. "He'll send word," he said. "He'll send word," she confirmed. Gomez, leaning against the stone wall with his arms folded, let out a long breath. "I've been standing here imagining several versions of how that went," he said. "None of them had you coming out this quickly." "He's not a complicated man," Morticia said. "He's a thorough one. The distinction matters." Harry looked at her. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "you go to dinner, and you sleep, and you go to your classes, and you let the situation develop. And when it's time," she touched his face briefly, the way she sometimes did, the specific gesture that meant "I see you," not the situation, you'll know. "And you'll be here. If not here, close," she said. "Close enough." Gomez pushed off the wall and put his arm around Harry's shoulders with the easy warmth of a man for whom physical affection is a first language. "We'll be at Blackthorn for the week," he said. "Gerald has developed some kind of territorial dispute with a heron that requires supervision. But we're an owl away." "An owl away," Harry repeated. He looked at both of them in the entrance hall of a school that had been, for 3 months, both home and something else, both the place he lived and the place where the thing that had defined his life before was preparing for its final move. He looked at them and thought about Albania, and the stone, and the cold dark on the other side of the locked door, and the letter that said "We're coming." "Okay," he said. "I'll wait." He said it like someone who knows the difference between waiting and being passive. He went to dinner. Chapter 5, Things that should not be woken. The thing about Quirrell was that he stopped pretending in the second week of December. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't announce it. He simply stopped performing the nervous tics, the stutter, the flinching, the elaborate jump every time someone came around a corner, and what was left was something quieter and considerably more frightening. He moved through the corridors with a stillness that the stutter had been concealing, and his eyes, when they landed on you, stayed a beat too long. Harry noticed on a Monday. By Wednesday, Hermione had noticed. By Thursday, Ron had noticed, which meant it was no longer subtle. "He looked at me in the corridor this morning," Ron said at breakfast, with the specific tone of someone reporting something they'd been trying to find a normal explanation for and had given up. "Just looked. For about 10 seconds. I was holding a book and he looked at the book and then at me and then he walked away. It was like being looked at by something wearing a person." "Something wearing a person," Hermione repeated. "Yeah." Harry put down his toast. He'd been thinking about the corridor since Monday, not with anxiety but with the focused attention of someone monitoring a situation that has begun to move. He'd written to Morticia on Tuesday. She'd written back Wednesday morning, "I know. Snape sent word last night. We're watching the same thing from different angles. Not yet, but soon. Not yet but soon was a different kind of waiting from before. It had a shape to it. Quirrell went to the 3rd floor last night, Harry said. I heard him. I was up late, couldn't sleep, and I heard his footsteps in the corridor below the tower. That shuffling walk he has, but faster. He looked at them. He was running. Hermione set down her quill. Running toward or running away? Toward, Harry said. He came back 20 minutes later. He didn't run back. He walked. Like whatever he'd gone to check had been satisfying. He's testing the defenses, Hermione said. Figuring out the sequence, Harry agreed. He's almost ready. Ron looked at both of them and then at his breakfast and then back, with the expression of someone who has accepted that their day is going to be more complicated than they'd like and has decided to face this on a full stomach. He served himself more eggs. Right, he said. So we need a plan. The plan, such as it was, lived in a corner of the common room in a collection of Hermione's notes that she'd organized into what she called a sequence analysis and what Ron called the world's most alarming homework. She'd mapped the protections. Not from direct observation, going to the 3rd floor was, as of 2 weeks ago, something Harry had agreed with Morticia to defer, but from inference, research, and the accumulated knowledge of 3 months of careful attention. She'd cross-referenced the known capabilities of the Hogwarts staff with the nature of high-security magical barriers documented in the texts she'd been working through, and she'd built a picture. Fluffy is the first, she said. The 3-headed dog. Hagrid's. He mentioned it to Harry in September, said you just had to know the right thing. Music, probably. Dogs respond to it and a charm that size would need a sensory override. Hagrid mentioned music. Ron said. Not in those words, Harry said. He said, just play a bit of music and then looked like he'd said too much. It was after the troll, when he was worried about something. I think he was thinking out loud. Second defense will be something botanical, Hermione said. Professor Sprout. Devil's Snare is the obvious choice, dark, confined space, the instinct to struggle does exactly the wrong thing. Don't panic, don't struggle, Ron recited. Warmth and light, yes. She moved to the next line. Then something with flying, Flitwick, probably. A logic challenge after that, Snape style, something that punishes haste. And then whatever Dumbledore put there himself, Harry said. The fire crackled. The common room was mostly empty, a late evening in December, most students downstairs are already in bed, the kind of quiet that settles over a place when the majority of its inhabitants have wound down. The mirror, Hermione said. She said it the way she said things she wasn't certain of but had strong reason to believe, with the slightly different quality of a theory that was almost a conclusion. I think it's the mirror of Eriste. There was a reference in one of the alchemy texts to a protection method involving a desire-based enchantment, the idea being that only someone who wanted to find the stone but not use it could retrieve it. Where did you get that? Ron asked. Flamel's published correspondences, she said. In the restricted section. The actual enchantment design is redacted but the principle is described. She paused. It's elegant. Almost no one would pass it, almost no one wants something without wanting to use it. Harry looked at the fire. He thought about wanting. He thought about what the mirror would show him, he was fairly sure he knew, and whether what it showed him would be the same as what it had been before, which had been his family, his parents, himself with people who looked like they loved him. He wasn't sure anymore. Things had changed. If it comes to it, he said, I can pass that defense. Hermione looked at him. You're sure? I'm not going to use the stone, he said simply. I don't want it. I just want to make sure no one else gets it. He paused. That's different enough. Hermione held his gaze for a moment, and something in her expression shifted, the specific adjustment of someone who is genuinely, quietly moved by something and is choosing not to make a thing of it, because making a thing of it would be less respectful than simply acknowledging it. "Yes," she said. "It is." Harry wrote to Morticia that night. He told her the sequence analysis. He told her what Hermione thought about the mirror. He told her that Quirrell had been to the third floor again that morning. McGonagall had noticed too, he thought, based on the way she'd looked at the empty defense chair at lunch with the expression she wore when she was calculating responses to developing problems. He ended with, "I think it's this week. Maybe sooner. I can feel it moving." He didn't know how to explain feel it moving more precisely than that. There was something in the air of the castle that had changed, a pressure, like weather building, like the specific atmosphere before a storm that hasn't announced itself yet but has already decided it's coming. He'd been aware of it since Monday and it was getting stronger. He sent the letter and sat by the window for a while, watching the snow on the grounds, and thought about what Wednesday had told him about falling down. The only version where it matters is the one where you don't get up. He went to bed. He slept. Snape's note arrived at 6:30 in the morning on a Thursday. It came not by owl but by a slip of parchment that appeared under Harry's dormitory door, which meant someone had come up the stairs in the night, and the handwriting was spare and angular and said 2 words, "Tonight. Library." Harry was dressed and downstairs before any of the other boys stirred. He sat by the common room fire and read the note 4 more times and then cast a warming charm on his hands because the castle was cold this morning in a way that was not entirely architectural. He sent 2 notes, one to Hermione and Ron, one to Morticia. Morticia's note said, "Snape. Tonight. I think this is it." Her reply came back in 40 minutes, which meant she'd been awake, which meant she'd been expecting it. "I'll be there by this afternoon. Don't go before I arrive." "I mean it, Harry." He wrote back, "I know. I won't." He meant it. She arrived at 2:30. Not through the front gates. Filch was watching the front gates today with the suspicious energy of someone who'd been told to expect something without being told what, but through the entrance Blishwick had identified in the original property survey as the West Servants' Passage, which led out into a corridor near the trophy room and which the wards recognized as a valid entry because Morticia's name was now legally associated with the castle in 3 separate ministry documents. Harry met her in the corridor outside the trophy room. Gomez was with her, and so was Wednesday. Wednesday had a bag. Harry looked at the bag and then at Wednesday and said, "What's in there?" "Things," Wednesday said. "Useful things. I don't carry the other kind." He looked at Morticia. She looked at him with the focused assessment she used for taking stock, checking the current version of him against her model, updating. "You slept," she said. "Yeah. Good." She looked at the corridor around them. "Where are Ron and Hermione?" "Hermione's outside the library. Ron's watching the 3rd-floor corridor from the staircase, far enough back that he can see anyone going in but not close enough to trigger anything." He paused. "He's got a good eye for position. He thinks in terms of chess." "Smart," Gomez said. "He is," Harry said. He looked at the 3 of them, Morticia in her black, Gomez vibrating with the contained energy of a man who is prepared for extraordinary things, Wednesday with her bag and the expression of someone who has done a tactical assessment and found it satisfactory. "Thank you for coming. Where else would we be?" Gomez said. There was no good answer to that. Harry nodded and led them toward the library. Snape was not in the library. What was in the library was a note, left in the specific place Harry had been told to look, inside a copy of Advanced Potion Making on the 3rd shelf, and the note said considerably more than 2 words this time. Miss Granger's sequence analysis is accurate except for one element. The chess set is not Flitwick's, it is McGonagall's, and it plays to conclusion, meaning one of you will need to sacrifice a piece. The botanical chamber will be dark and confined. The potion chamber is a logic problem. There are 7 bottles, 1 forward, 1 back, 4 neutral, 1 poison. I have mapped the solution. See attached. On the attached page was a grid. Hermione, reading over Harry's shoulder, made a sharp sound that was either recognition or admiration. "He's been through it," she said. "He mapped the actual solution." "He went through the whole corridor," Harry said. "He went through to verify," Morticia said. She was reading the main note. "Not to stop it. He wanted to know the current state of each defense." She turned the note over. On the back, in smaller writing, "The mirror is in the final chamber. I believe the configuration has changed since installation. Dumbledore modified it 2 weeks ago, which I observed from the movement of certain wards. I don't know the new configuration. I believe Potter does." Harry looked at it. He thought about the mirror. About what it would show him now. He was fairly sure he knew, and the knowing didn't frighten him the way he thought it might have, once. "There's a line at the bottom," Hermione said. Harry looked. Smaller still, almost as if it had been added as an afterthought that was actually the most important thing. "Quirrell is already in the corridor. He went in an hour ago. He hasn't come out. I will be there within the hour, but I'll need time. Don't wait if you hear something wrong. The stone cannot leave the castle." The library went quiet in a way that meant everyone had finished processing and was now in a different mode entirely. "He's already in there," Ron said from the doorway, where he'd appeared silently with the specific economy of motion of someone who had run without wanting to be heard running. "How long have you been there?" Hermione said. "Long enough," Ron said. He looked at Harry. "I came to get you. I heard the door, the third-floor door. It was open." Filch came up the stairs 2 minutes later and saw it open, and he looked scared. "He didn't go in. He's gone to get someone." "Dumbledore," Morticia said. "Or Snape," Harry said. "Or both." "It won't matter," Morticia said. She was already moving toward the library door, thinking at a speed that Harry could track because he'd been watching her think for 3 months. If Quirrell gets the stone before anyone reaches the final chamber, it doesn't matter who's been notified. The stone leaves the castle tonight and there is no recovery from that. "Then we go now," Harry said. "We go now," she confirmed. She looked at Gomez. Something passed between them in the particular wordless register of people who have been speaking the same language for 20 years. "I go first," she said. "Absolutely not," Gomez said, with great affection and complete firmness. "We go together." She almost smiled. "Together," she said. Wednesday had opened her bag. The third-floor corridor was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Harry had walked past it dozens of times and felt the presence on the other side of the door, but being in the corridor itself was different. The cold was directional, coming from the far end where the locked door stood open, exactly as Ron had said, the lock broken not by force but by something precise and quiet that had undone the mechanism without disturbing the door. "Alohomora," Hermione said, looking at the lock. "Modified." "He knows his charms," Morticia said. She pushed the door open wider and looked into the darkness beyond. "Mr. Weasley. Stay here." Ron started. "But, I need someone at this door," she said. "When Snape arrives, he needs to know where we are and that the door has been breached. That's not a lesser role. It's the role that prevents the whole thing from collapsing." Ron looked at Harry. "She's right," Harry said. "You're the message. If this goes wrong, you're the one who gets help to us." Ron absorbed this. The expression on his face was the one he wore when he'd made a decision about something and was living inside it with the total commitment of someone who doesn't do things halfway. "Go," he said. "I'll be here." They went through. The dog was enormous and three-headed and furious and was already partially sedated, which meant Quirrell had been there first, but partially was doing a lot of work in that sentence because 2 of the 3 heads were still very much operational and found the new arrivals interesting in the way that large predatory animals find small moving things interesting. Wednesday had a flute in her bag. She produced it and played with the crisp, economical competence of someone who has practiced this specific contingency, which Harry didn't ask about because it was Wednesday and this kind of preparation was her baseline. The third head went under within 30 seconds, and the other two followed with a slowness that suggested they were annoyed about it. "Trapdoor," Gomez said, already moving. They went down. The botanical chamber was dark and full of Devil's Snare, exactly as Hermione had predicted, and the snare reacted to them immediately with the aggressive enthusiasm of a plant that has been waiting for something to grab and is very committed to its function. Hermione lit her wand, Lumos Solum rather than the basic charm, full-spectrum light, the kind that burned rather than just illuminated, and the snare recoiled with a sound that suggested genuine offense. Morticia walked through it without changing pace. The snare, encountering something it couldn't read, not warm in the normal sense, not the right kind of vital, hesitated in a way that nothing with no nervous system should have been capable of, and then pressed back against the walls and stayed there. Harry, moving through it behind her, thought, "It doesn't know what she is." He found he understood the feeling. The Flying Keys chamber was already disrupted, Quirrell had been through it, and the enchantment that kept the keys in coordinated flight had been destabilized, the keys swirling in broken patterns. The door at the far end had a fresh opening charm on it. They went through without stopping. The chess chamber was the one that stopped them. The board was vast, the pieces were McGonagall's, which meant they were intelligent in a way that Flitwick's would not have been, and intelligent chess pieces play differently from automated ones. They don't just execute strategy. They read intent. The white pieces were blocking the far door. They had the specific configuration of pieces that have already fought once and won and are prepared to fight again, arranged with the settled confidence of things that know their function and have performed it recently. Quirrell sacrificed himself across, Hermione said, reading the board with the rapid assessment she gave complex problems. Her wand was out, tracking the positions. He moved himself as a piece. "Look, there's a space in the black formation where a player was." He got through. How did he get through? Harry asked. He sacrificed a black piece, she said. And then himself, probably. The enchantment lets you through if one of your pieces takes a terminal position. It's brutal. It's also elegant. She was moving around the board's edge. We need a black player. One sacrifice, knight position here, no, Gomez said. Everyone looked at him. He was already stepping onto the board. Gomez, Morticia said. I've been playing chess since I was 4, he said, with the profound serenity of a man doing the thing he was made for. And I have always found that the most interesting games are the ones where the stakes are real. He looked at the board, at the white pieces, at the patterns of what Quirrell had done. Give me 90 seconds. Gomez, 90 seconds, cara mia. He looked at her with the expression he had when he was being absolutely earnest, which was different from his general expression of joyful intensity by the specific quality of stillness in it. I'll be fine. I always get up. Morticia looked at him for one long moment. Then, don't show off. I make no promises. He stepped onto the board. What followed was, as Hermione would later describe it to anyone who asked, the most extraordinary display of chess strategy she had ever witnessed in her life, including everything she'd read, which was considerable. Gomez played at a speed that suggested he'd seen the whole game before he started it, each move deliberate, each sacrifice chosen rather than forced, working with and against the white piece's intelligence with the particular quality of a player who respects his opponent enough to take them seriously. At the 60-second mark, he moved his king's knight to a position that the white queen couldn't ignore. She took it. The board shifted. The path to the far door opened. Gomez stepped off the board at the door, straightened his jacket, and said, "Shall we?" He had a bruise forming along his left jaw from a piece that had moved faster than expected. He appeared unbothered. Morticia touched his face briefly. He turned his head and kissed her palm, which she allowed for exactly as long as the moment required. "Through," she said, and they went through. The potion chamber matched Snape's map. 7 bottles, the logic inscribed on a scroll of parchment near the wall, and Harry read it while Hermione cross-referenced with the grid from Snape's note, and they had the solution in 40 seconds, the smallest bottle forward, the round bottle back. He went forward, Morticia said, looking at the bottles. The smallest was nearly empty. He's already in the final chamber. He'll have the stone by now, Hermione said. Or he'll be at the mirror. Not necessarily, Harry said. He was looking at the door that led forward. The mirror won't give it to him. That's what it does, it shows you what you want, but it doesn't give you the wanting. He wants to use it. That means he can't get it from the mirror. He's stuck. Then we have time, Morticia said. Not much, Harry said. If he figures out the mechanism, he won't, Morticia said. Because the mechanism is specifically designed against people like him. Dumbledore built it for someone who doesn't want the stone as a tool. She looked at Harry. He built it for you. There it was again, the thing Harry had felt in October, the awareness that a situation had been constructed around him. He looked at it clearly this time, without resentment or fear, and what he saw was, yes, and also, it doesn't matter. The stone was there. Quirrell was there. The intention behind the design wasn't the point. The point was what he did with it. Hermione takes the return bottle, he said. She goes back, gets Ron, waits for Snape. You two, he looked at Morticia and Gomez, come with me. And me, Wednesday said, from behind Gomez, where she'd been moving through each chamber with the quiet efficiency of someone who had decided from the outset that she was going all the way and had seen no reason to announce this. Harry looked at her. You knew I was coming, she said. I knew, he said. Hermione, Morticia said. Hermione was already holding the round bottle. Her expression had the specific quality it wore when she had done all the preparation she could do and was now at the boundary of preparation and event and was making the transition. Be careful, she said, to Harry specifically, with the directness of someone who means it as information rather than instruction. You too, he said. She drank the return potion and went back through the black flame. The four of them looked at the door to the final chamber. Ready? Gomez said, to the room. I've been ready since September, Wednesday said. They went through. The final chamber was large enough that the mirror of Eriste stood at its center and still left space for the darkness to breathe. Quirrell was in front of it. He'd been there long enough that his robes were damp, sweat, or the cold of the room, or both, and he had his wand raised at the mirror's surface with the expression of someone who has been trying variations on a problem for 20 minutes and is losing their patience with the problem and with themselves simultaneously. He didn't hear them come in. He was too focused on the mirror, and the mirror was showing him something that had absorbed his whole attention, and for just a moment Harry could see what it was, Quirrell's own face, but restored, younger, brighter, without the corruption that 10 months of carrying something parasitic had worked on him. A version of himself that no longer existed and that the mirror was showing him because that was what it did, showed you what you wanted most, and what Quirrell wanted most was himself back. Harry almost felt sorry for him. Then Quirrell turned. He was faster than Harry had expected, and his wand came up with the automatic precision of a man who had been trained well before he'd been broken, a stupefy already forming, but Morticia moved at the same time, not with a spell, because she hadn't drawn her wand, and what she did instead was step in front of Harry with the complete unthinking authority of someone for whom this positioning requires no decision. The stupefy hit her in the shoulder. She absorbed it without going down. Quirrell's eyes went wide. Mrs. Addams, he said, and his voice was wrong, doubled, layered, like two instruments playing slightly different notes. One of them was Quirrell's. The other was not. Professor, she said. A silence. You shouldn't be here, he said. Still two voices. The second one was colder and lower and spoke across the first like something that had learned human speech as a second language and found it limiting. The boy I expected. Not you. Then you've been doing your research selectively, she said. Gomez had his wand out and was moving along the right wall of the chamber in the easy, unhurried way of someone who has decided on a position and is taking it without announcing it. Wednesday had gone left. Not subtle, but not required to be, Quirrell's attention was on Morticia. Which was the point? Harry stepped out from behind her. "Quirrell," he said. Quirrell's head snapped toward him. The doubling in his voice was worse now, the second voice pressing up harder, as if the arrival of Harry Potter had agitated it. "Yes," the second voice said, and this one wasn't even trying to be Quirrell anymore. "Harry Potter." At last. Harry looked at the turban. He'd been told what was under it by the combination of Hermione's research and a conversation with Morticia about what partial possession looked like, and knowing didn't make the reality of it less extraordinary, but it also didn't make it frightening. It made it clear. This was a man whose body was being used by something that had survived a decade without flesh by finding a host with weak enough defenses and strong enough desperation to accept the arrangement. "You came for the stone," Harry said. "We came for the stone," the second voice said. Quirrell's mouth, but not Quirrell's phrasing. "And you will help us get it." "Why would I do that?" "Because we will offer you things that your current arrangement cannot." The voice changed quality. It was trying, Harry recognized, to be persuasive, which meant it was reading him and adjusting. "Power. Knowledge. Your parents don't," Harry said. The voice stopped. "Don't," Harry said again, more quietly. "I know what you're going to say and I know how it works and I don't want what you're offering." He looked at Quirrell, at the man inside the corruption, who was still in there, visible in the brief flickers when the second voice went quiet. "Quirrell. I'm sorry this happened to you." Quirrell's face did something complicated. "You don't," his own voice, coming through. Frightened and angry and something else underneath, something that was just tired. "You don't understand what it is. What it takes, I understand," Harry said. "I understand being told you're not enough. That you need to be more. That the thing being offered to you is the thing that will finally make you sufficient." He paused. "I know what that sounds like. I know why you said yes." The chamber was very quiet. Quirrell was looking at him with an expression that was almost impossible to hold, the expression of someone being seen, actually seen, in a moment when being seen is the worst possible thing and also the only thing they've wanted. The second voice surged back. "Enough. The stone, Potter. Look in the mirror and take it for us." "No," Harry said. "You will." "No," Harry said, and took a step toward the mirror. Not because he'd been told to. Because the mirror was the last defense and he was the person Dumbledore had built it for, and being built for something didn't mean being owned by it, it meant being suited to it, and being suited to the moment was not the same as being trapped by it. He stood in front of the mirror of Eriste and looked. He'd expected his parents. He'd expected the first vision he'd ever seen in it, the version of himself surrounded by family, the thing he'd always wanted. What he saw was himself, standing exactly where he was standing, with the stone in his pocket. Not using it. Not transforming it. Holding it, in the sense of having taken it from where it could be stolen, having kept it from the person who would use it to end the world's uncertain peace. The stone appeared in his pocket. He felt it, small, smooth, real. He turned around. "I have it," he said. The second voice made a sound that was not a human sound. Quirrell moved. He was fast, the possession had given him strength that exceeded what his frame should have carried, and he crossed the chamber in 2 seconds and his hands were on Harry's shoulders before Morticia or Gomez had completed their movement. Harry grabbed his wrists. Not strategically. Reflexively. The reaction of someone being grabbed who grabs back. The effect was immediate and severe and not what anyone in the chamber had expected. Quirrell screamed. His hands, where Harry was holding them, were burning. Not from fire. From something intrinsic, something in Harry's skin itself, a reaction that Harry felt as heat but that appeared on Quirrell's flesh as actual damage, blistering and darkening where Harry's fingers were wrapped around his wrists. Quirrell wrenched back. His face was contorted and the second voice was screaming with him now, not separate but merged in the pain. "What are you?" Quirrell gasped. "I don't know," Harry said honestly. "Let me see," Morticia said. She was beside him, not pulling him back, not trying to manage the moment, just there, and she looked at Quirrell's hands and then at Harry's with the focused calm of someone conducting an examination. "Love magic," she said. "Old. It was worked into his skin when it happened, when Voldemort's curse rebounded. A protection. Your mother's." "My mother's," Harry said. "Love leaves a mark," she said. "Apparently a permanent one." The second voice was fading. Quirrell had collapsed to his knees. The blistering had spread up his arms and he was shaking, not with cold but with whatever was happening inside him, the parasite reacting to the damage, pulling back, and the pulling back was its own violence. "Quirrell," Harry said. He looked up. His face was his own now, just his own, the overlay gone, and in it Harry could see the man who had gone to Albania looking for something to make himself extraordinary and had found something that had eaten him instead. "I'm sorry," Quirrell said. His voice was just his voice. Exhausted. Almost free. "I know," Harry said. Then Quirrell's eyes went empty, and he fell forward, and didn't move again. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then a cold, formless presence pressed through the room, not a sound, not a sight, but a pressure, the specific pressure of something displaced from its host and trying to find an exit, and it moved through the chamber like weather and then through Harry, specifically, which should have been terrible and was instead just cold, briefly, and then it was gone. Harry stood with the stone in his pocket and his hands at his sides and the silence of the chamber settling around him. Gomez's hand came down on his shoulder. Solid, warm, the specific weight of someone who is there. "You all right?" Gomez said. Harry thought about it honestly. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." "You're sure?" "My hands are warm," Harry said. "Other than that?" Gomez turned him gently by the shoulder and looked at his face in the way he did when he was doing a different kind of assessment from Morticia's, less analytical, more purely present. Whatever he found in Harry's face appeared to satisfy him, because he nodded and released him. Wednesday had crossed to Quirrell and was kneeling beside him with 2 fingers on his neck. She looked up. "Alive," she said. "Pulse is weak but it's there." She looked at her own hands, then at Quirrell, then at Harry. Whatever left him, it left most of him intact. "Can he be saved?" Harry asked. He directed it at Morticia. She was looking at Quirrell with the measured attention she brought to things she was deciding about. "I don't know," she said honestly. "What was done to him was extensive. But he's not dead and the entity is gone and that gives him a chance he didn't have 10 minutes ago." She paused. "That was your doing." "It was my mother's," Harry said. "Your mother gave you the capacity," Morticia said. "You chose to hold on instead of letting go. That was yours." He thought about this. He thought about Quirrell's face just before the end, the exhaustion, the brief clarity, the "I'm sorry" that had been genuine in the way only things you've stopped trying to manage can be genuine. He wanted to matter, Harry said. That's all it was, really. It usually is, Morticia said. The chamber was cold and dark and smelled of old magic and something chemical and faintly of the sea, though the sea was 60 miles away, and above them, through the defenses, through the trapdoor, through the door, the castle was full of people who didn't know yet what had happened in this room. Harry took the stone from his pocket and held it. Small. Red. Perfectly ordinary looking. "What do we do with it?" he asked. "We give it to Dumbledore," Morticia said. "With the expectation that he destroys it. Which he will, because Flamel will ask him to and because he'll understand, finally, what it costs to keep it. And if he doesn't understand? Then I'll explain it to him," she said, with the specific quality of someone for whom explanation is not a passive act. Harry nodded. He closed his hand around the stone, and kept it. Then the chamber door opened and Snape came through. He stopped when he saw the room, Quirrell on the floor, the four of them standing, the mirror dark and still. His eyes moved across it all with the rapid assessment of someone doing triage, and then they landed on Harry. Harry held up his closed fist and opened it. The stone sat in his palm. Snape looked at it. Then at Harry. Then at Morticia. "He's alive," Wednesday said, from beside Quirrell. "Barely." Snape crossed to Quirrell with the efficiency of a man who knows exactly what he's looking at and is already cataloging what needs to happen next. He cast a diagnostic spell, read the results with his jaw set and his expression controlled in the way it was when he was suppressing something that wanted to be louder. "We'll need Poppy," he said. "The possession left damage." "It's not," he stopped. "He needs the hospital wing." "Can you levitate him?" Morticia asked. Snape cast the charm without answering. Quirrell lifted smoothly, hovering at waist height. Snape looked at Harry. "The stone," he said. "I'll give it to Dumbledore," Harry said. I'll give it to Dumbledore," Harry said again. Not with defiance. With the calm clarity of someone who knows exactly where the line is and is standing on the correct side of it. Snape looked at him for a moment. Then at Morticia. The look between them, brief, assessing, containing the memory of the conversation in the office, was the look of two people who have negotiated a truce and are both checking that it's holding. Through the corridor, Snape said, and led the way with Quirrell floating behind him. Harry looked at the mirror one more time. In it he saw himself standing exactly where he was standing, with his family around him. He turned away and followed. Chapter 6. What remains? Dumbledore's office at 2 in the morning had a different quality from the office at any other time. The portrait slept, or performed sleep, which amounted to the same thing, the instruments on their shelves had stilled, and the fireplace burned at a low, orange register that made everything in the room look like it was in the process of being remembered rather than currently happening. Dumbledore sat behind his desk and Harry sat across from it, and Harry placed the Philosopher's Stone on the surface between them. It sat there. Small, red, ordinary-looking. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Morticia was in the chair to Harry's right. Gomez stood behind her with his hand on the back of the chair. Wednesday was at the window looking out at the grounds, which were dark and snow-covered and offered nothing of practical interest, but Wednesday looked at things that offered nothing of practical interest with the same focus she brought to everything. Dumbledore looked at the stone. Then at Harry. His eyes, behind the half-moon spectacles, did the thing they did, the complicated layering of warmth and assessment and something underneath both that was harder to name. In Harry's first weeks at Hogwarts he had found those eyes comforting, then confusing, then, somewhere in October, clarifying. They showed him a man who genuinely cared about outcomes and had long since stopped being certain that the way he pursued those outcomes was the only way. "You found it before I expected you to," Dumbledore said. "Quirrell was in the corridor tonight," Harry said. "He'd been testing the defenses all week. It was moving." "I know," Dumbledore said. "I was away. I came back as quickly as I could." "You were called away," Harry said. "Conveniently." Dumbledore was quiet. "Someone sent you a letter," Harry said. "Something urgent, something that required you to leave the school. And the letter was probably fabricated, or the urgent thing was probably arranged, because Voldemort, knew that the one person who might intervene in time was you." "Yes," Dumbledore said. Quietly. "Without the management. That is what I believe happened." "So he left the castle deliberately," Harry said. "Knowing I was here. Knowing the stone was here. Knowing that without you, the defenses were the only thing between him and it." "Yes. And you built those defenses," Harry said, "with me in mind." The fire crackled. Outside, something, an owl, probably, crossed the dark sky over the grounds. Dumbledore took off his spectacles and set them on the desk beside the stone. Without them his face was different, older, more tired, more genuinely itself. "I built them as a trap," he said. "Or rather, I built them as a test. For whoever came through." He paused. "I believed that you would come through. I believed that when the moment arrived, you would be the one standing in the final chamber, and I believed that the stone would respond to you correctly." "You believed I'd pass the mirror's test," Harry said. "That I'd want to find it but not use it." "Yes. And if I hadn't? If I'd wanted to use it? Then the enchantment would have held and you would not have received it," Dumbledore said. "But I didn't believe that would happen." He paused again. "I believed it because I knew what you were. What you'd survived. I believed that a child who had been through what you had been through would not want power for its own sake. Would not want the stone as a tool." He folded his hands on the desk. "I was right about that." "You were right about it," Harry agreed. "And you were wrong about everything else." The room was very quiet. Dumbledore looked at him. "You knew what the Dursleys were doing," Harry said. "Before I came to Hogwarts. A house elf told you. You didn't act." He said this without heat, without the quaver of a child performing confrontation. He said it the way he said things he decided were simply true. "You needed me to arrive here exactly as I was, not broken, but bent. Not destroyed, but shaped. Humble enough to not be arrogant. Frightened enough to be cautious. Young enough to believe that the adults around me had things handled." He paused. "You needed me to walk into the corridor and be brave and selfless because you'd made sure I didn't have enough to be anything else." The silence that followed this was the longest silence Harry had ever sat inside. Morticia did not speak. She did not need to. She was present in the room the way load-bearing walls are present, structural, essential, not requiring acknowledgement. Dumbledore looked at the stone for a long time. Then he looked at Harry with something in his face that was not the complicated layering of before. It was simpler. It was the expression of a very old man looking at the cost of something he chose a long time ago and finding it larger than he'd let himself calculate. "I cannot tell you," he said slowly, "that I had no choice. I had choices. I made them believing they were the correct ones. I made them believing that the greater good required certain." He stopped. Started again, because the language he'd reached for was the language he'd been using for 60 years and it wasn't adequate for this room. "I made them because I was afraid of what would happen if things went differently. If you grew up knowing who you were. If you arrived here with confidence instead of uncertainty. I was afraid of what that might look like." "A threat," Harry said. "A variable I couldn't calculate," Dumbledore said, which was more honest than a threat, and they both knew it. "I am not going to tell you that my intentions were anything other than what they were, which is that I wanted you to be exactly what this situation required and I took actions to ensure it." He looked at Harry directly, without the warmth or the management. Just looking. "I am sorry, Harry. I am sorry that the calculation included you as a variable and not as a person. I am sorry that I knew what was happening in that house and I chose the strategic geometry over the child inside it." A pause. "I'm sorry." Harry listened to the apology and let it be what it was. He'd thought about this moment. Not obsessively, he wasn't that kind of person, or he was becoming less that kind of person, but clearly, with the particular clarity that came from having someone in his life who modeled what it looked like to look at things directly. He'd thought about Dumbledore's choices and his own existence as a consequence of them and the anger that should have been there, the righteous fury that the story seemed to call for. The anger was there. He knew it was there. But it wasn't the dominant thing, and the reason it wasn't the dominant thing was sitting in the chair to his right. "I believe you," he said to Dumbledore. "That you're sorry. I also think that being sorry and understanding what you did wrong are two different things, and I think you might still be confusing them." He paused. "You apologized for including me in a calculation. The thing that you actually did was leave a child in a place you knew was hurting him because his suffering was strategically convenient." Dumbledore was very still. "Those aren't the same apology," Harry said. Another long silence. No, Dumbledore said. They are not. Harry nodded. He looked at the stone on the desk. I want you to give it to Flammel, he said. And I want you to ask him to destroy it. He'll want to do that regardless, Dumbledore said. He's been wanting to for some time. Then ask him tonight, Harry said. Don't wait. Dumbledore looked at the stone for a moment with the expression of someone who has decided something definitively. Yes, he said. Tonight. Harry stood. He went through the corridor to verify the defenses. He got me the map. He came when it mattered. He paused. Whatever he's carrying, whatever he owes, or thinks he owes, or however you've been using him, he doesn't deserve to keep carrying it alone. Dumbledore was very quiet. That's all, Harry said, and went out. The hospital wing at 3 in the morning was white and still and smelled of dittany and something chemical beneath it. Madame Pomfrey had been awake since midnight and had the specific energy of a healer who has shifted from professional concern to focused problem-solving to the grim satisfaction of someone doing hard work well. Quirrell was in the bed at the far end. Harry stopped in the doorway. Pomfrey looked at him with the sharp, assessing eyes of a woman who has treated hundreds of students for hundreds of things and has long since stopped being surprised by what they walk in carrying. Visiting hours, she said. I know, Harry said. 1 minute. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned her back, which was her way of saying yes without saying yes. Harry walked to the far bed. Quirrell was asleep, properly asleep, not unconscious, the difference visible in the quality of his breathing, which was slow and even rather than labored. His hands were bandaged. His face was his own, just his own, with no overlay and no second voice and the particular peaceful blankness of someone who has been in significant pain and has been given something to stop it. Harry stood at the end of the bed and looked at him. He thought about what Quirrell had wanted, to matter, to be extraordinary, to be enough. He thought about how those wants had been found and used and turned into a key that opened the wrong door. He thought about how the story of Quirrell Quirinius, if it was ever told, would mostly be told as the villain's chapter, the foolish professor, the weak man who said yes to the wrong thing. He thought that was probably incomplete. I hope you come back, Harry said quietly. Not from obligation. Just, I hope you do. He turned and walked back to the door. Pomfrey was checking something at her desk and did not acknowledge him leaving, which he appreciated. They found Ron and Hermione in the corridor outside the hospital wing at 3:30. Ron had a bruise on his forehead from where, he explained, a suit of armor had attempted to stop him coming to find them and he had declined to be stopped, and Hermione had a first aid charm on her wrist from the same encounter, which suggested they'd come together, which suggested that Hermione had gone looking for Ron when the return potion brought her back and Ron had been waiting for her, which Harry filed as something that would mean more later. What happened? Ron said. Harry told them. He told them quickly and without embellishment, which was how he'd learned to tell things that mattered. The less you performed a story, the more room it had to be what it was. Ron, by the end of it, looked like a person who has processed something significant and has done the processing mostly in real time rather than saving it for later, which was Ron's particular quality. He felt things immediately and wholly and then moved on, rather than storing them up. The stone, he said. With Dumbledore. He's giving it to Flammel tonight. Quirrell. Alive. Hospital wing. Voldemort. Gone. Harry paused. For now. Ron nodded. He looked at Gomez and Wednesday and Morticia with the open, uncomplicated assessment of someone who has decided he likes people before he has reasons to and then finds the reasons later. Thank you, he said. For going in with him. Of course, Gomez said, with absolute sincerity. That's a very good bruise, by the way, Wednesday said, looking at Ron's forehead. Ron blinked. Is it? The shape is excellent, she said. Clean impact, good color. Suits you. Ron looked at Harry with the expression of someone wanting confirmation that this was a compliment. It's a compliment, Harry said. Right, Ron said. Cheers. Hermione was looking at Morticia with the expression she wore when she was running a calculation and had arrived at something she wanted to say but was deciding how to say it. Morticia met her gaze without pressure. The love magic, Hermione said. You knew what it was immediately. In the chamber. I recognized it, Morticia said. Old blood magic. Sacrifice-based. It leaves a physical trace in the person who was protected. How did you know what to look for? I've read extensively, Morticia said. And I've spent a great deal of time understanding the specific nature of what was done to Harry in October of 1981, because understanding it seemed important. She paused. His mother made a choice in that room. It marked him. The mark isn't a curse or a scar in the simple sense, it's a continuation. She is, in some small but real way, still present in what that touch does. Hermione absorbed this. His mother, she said. Yes. Hermione looked at Harry with the expression she had when something had just become a great deal more real to her and she was sitting inside the reality of it. Harry looked back at her and didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say that would be more useful than just letting her look. Right, she said finally. Right. Go to bed, Harry said. Both of you. You're not, Ron started. I'm going to sit outside for a bit, Harry said. I'm not, I'm fine. I just want some air. Ron looked at him. Promise you're fine. I promise. Right. Ron pointed at him with the finger of someone making an executive decision. Breakfast. You eat breakfast. Promise that too. I promise I'll eat breakfast, Harry said. Ron appeared satisfied. He clapped Harry on the shoulder in the way he'd taken to doing, brief, solid, entirely unceremonious, and steered Hermione toward the staircase, Hermione already talking in a low voice about the love magic and its documented cases and whether there were other examples in the literature. Their voices faded up the stairs. Harry sat on the steps outside the entrance hall and looked at the grounds. The snow on the lawn was blue-white in the dark, undisturbed, and the forbidden forest was a black mass at the edge of the grounds with no clear edges, just the suggestion of depth. The sky was beginning the barely perceptible lightning that preceded dawn, not light yet, just less dark, the sky deciding. Morticia sat beside him. Not close, not far. The right distance. She looked at the grounds with him in the comfortable silence that they'd developed over 3 months of mornings and evenings and library hours and cliff paths, the silence that meant neither of them needed the other to be doing anything in particular. Gomez sat on his other side. He had produced, from somewhere in his jacket, a small flask, which he held for a moment and then capped and put away without drinking, as if he'd decided the moment didn't need it. Wednesday stood at the bottom of the steps with her bag and her dark coat and her face turned toward the forbidden forest with the expression she wore when she was thinking about something that interested her. The expression was a constant regardless of context, which Harry found stabilizing. She's thinking about what's in the forest, Harry said. She's always thinking about what's in the forest, Gomez said. We've had to have a conversation about that at every school she's attended. What do you tell her? We tell her to be thorough, Morticia said. Harry almost laughed. The almost was enough, the specific warming quality of something that was about to be a laugh but didn't need to complete itself, just needed to be on its way. He looked at the grounds for a while and thought about the year. September and the broadcast and the card and the library at Blackthorn Hall and the cliff path and Gerald and the weight of eating regular meals and Wednesday's instruction and dueling in the garden and Hermione's voice saying the stone with the tone of someone who had found what they were looking for. He thought about Draco Malfoy sitting at the Gryffindor table with a bread roll, trying on a different version of himself. He thought about Snape turning the chalk in his fingers and the portrait on the wall with the dark, watchful eyes. He thought about the mirror. Morticia, he said. Yes. The mirror, he said. What it showed me in the end. It showed me myself holding the stone. But I've seen the mirror before. She turned to look at him. The beginning of the year, he said. Before all of this. I found it in a disused classroom. I stood in front of it for a long time. He paused. It showed me my family. My parents, and people around them, and myself in the middle of them. A whole crowd of people who looked like they loved me. And tonight, she said. Tonight it showed me myself with the stone. He looked at the snow. Just me with the stone in my pocket. Not my parents. Not a crowd of people. He thought about it. Not the mirror of Eriste anymore. Not the reflection of my deepest desire. Morticia was quiet. I think, Harry said slowly, that I stopped wanting a family in the abstract. He paused. Because I have one. Actually have one. So the wanting changed. The grounds were very still. Somewhere in the forest something, a bird, or something that wasn't a bird, called once and then went quiet. That's what the mirror does, Morticia said. It shows you the gap. What's missing? Her voice was measured and quiet in the way it was when she was saying something that cost her a little. When the gap is filled, it shows you something else. What you can do. Harry thought about this. You filled it, he said. She said. You came toward us too. You ate breakfast. You sat on the cliff. You wrote letters. She paused. You held on in that chamber instead of letting go. He nodded slowly. The sky was definitely getting lighter now, the edge of the horizon separating itself from the rest of the dark, a line of something not quite blue. Are we going home for Christmas? Harry said. We are, Gomez said, with the simple delight of a man for whom the word home has always been joyful and who finds it newly joyful in this specific context for specific reasons. Pugsley has been asking about you, Wednesday said, from the bottom of the steps, without turning around. Every day since the review. He wants to show you the basement. I've been thinking about the basement, Harry said. It's time, she said. Second visit threshold was passed 2 weekends ago. What's actually in there? Things, Wednesday said. The useful kind. Harry looked at Morticia. She looked back at him with the expression that was not quite a smile but was everything a smile was underneath, warm, definite, present. Pugsley also, Gomez said carefully, has built something new in the last 3 weeks. He described it to me as a recursive charm amplifier, which means he's either created something genuinely useful or he's about to set fire to the East Wing again. Again. More actions Claude Sonnet 4.